Anime autopsy here, and I need you to stop arguing about the Egghead traitor for 1 second, because we as a community are obsessing over the wrong problem. Every timeline is spammed with panels of York smirking in the lab, arrows pointing to Seraphim command chips, people yelling, "She was sus all along," and "Listen to me. You are hunting for the traitor in the wrong room." Everyone's staring at Egghead's security feeds while the real security breach might already be eating meat on the sunny. We need to talk about the possibility that the Straw Hats already have a traitor, and that Oda has been quietly telling you this for years. Not with a giant neon sign, but with the same structural foreshadowing he uses every single time he wants to break somebody's trust. Here's the thing. Fans treat the Straw Hats as this untouchable found family bubble, this sacred category of they would never hurt each other, and on an emotional level this is not a sin, this is fine, this is normal, you're supposed to love them. But from a writing perspective, from the way this author builds his arcs, that assumption is starting to look less wholesome and more delusional. Go back through the story and pay attention to one pattern. Alabasta. Crocodile spies already inside the kingdom. Water 7 and Eni's lobby, CP9 literally living as galley last shipwrights. Marineford, Squad stabbing Whitebeard in the chest because of a single whispered lie. Dressrosa, Doflamingo's agents embedded in every faction. Wano, Kanjuro feeding information to Orochi for years. Egghead, York selling out the other Vegapunks. This is not a handful of cute twists. This is a structural pillar of One Piece storytelling. And yet, when you bring up a Straw Hat traitor, the community acts offended on Oda's behalf, as if the author who made a father figure shank the world's strongest man on page is suddenly too shy to hurt your feelings. I keep seeing people post Kanjuro's reveal panel, or Squad's breakdown, or York's heel turn with captions about how Oda always does this to side characters, as if the main crew is in a completely different category of narrative risk. Except, why would they be? Why would the final saga, the part of the story explicitly about tearing down old systems and exposing hidden truths, be the one place where he refuses to pull the trigger he's been loading for 25 years? I'm not saying this as a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast every time Usopp lies about having 8,000 followers. I'm saying it because Oda already showed us how the Straw Hats get betrayed. The blueprint is on the page. The emotional beats are rehearsed. The only thing he hasn't done yet is aim that gun at the main crew. By the end of this video, you're either going to agree that one Straw Hat is perfectly positioned to sell the others out, or you're going to have to explain away a mountain of receipts. Your call. So before we start pointing fingers at your favorite little pirate son or daughter, we need to have a grown-up conversation about what this video actually is. This is a 2+ hour deep dive. This is not 10 minutes of wild accusations and a thumbnail with Sanji glowing red. I am not asking you to believe a crack theory. I'm asking you to sit through a forensic breakdown of patterns in how Oda writes Betrayal, and then decide whether those same patterns are quietly wrapped around the Straw Hats. Here's the thing. The core argument is not X Straw Hat is definitely the traitor, subscribe for the answer. The argument is that Oda has structurally prepared One Piece for an internal betrayal, and he has already framed specific crewmates as candidates using repeated motifs, suspicious gaps, and mirrored story beats. The traitor is a narrative slot that already exists. We're just arguing about whose name is on it. If we don't define what counts as evidence versus coincidence, everything turns into noise. Every panel becomes proof of whatever your favorite headcanon is, and the community turns into a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast every time Oda draws a shadow. This is not a sin. This is normal. We all do it. But if we're going to say Robin is doomed, or Usopp snaps, or Sanji sells them out, we need to be able to explain why a particular scene belongs in the betrayal category and not the cool visual bro category. So I need you to know the plan up front. First, we're going to build a conceptual framework. Foreshadowing, retrofitting, and pre-writing, applied specifically to betrayal. How does an author intentionally seed a traitor? How does Oda retrofit suspicion onto someone like Kanjuro? Where can we prove he pre-wrote a double cross the way Squad stabbing Whitebeard was baked into Marineford's emotional architecture from the start? Then we go arc by arc. Alabaster's spies, CP9 inside Galley La, Doflamingo's agents running Dressrosa, Kanjuro in Wano, York on Egghead. We'll map the recurring structure, the leak, the misdirection, the reveal, the emotional fallout. Only after that do we touch the straw hats. Robin's unique value to the world government, Usopp's fake identities and chronic lying, Sanji's history of being traded as political capital, Jinbe's split loyalties, Frankie's blueprints, even Luffy's role as the one person whose betrayal would shatter the story's moral physics. And listen to me. I am not above this. I have spent an embarrassing percentage of my life cataloguing One Piece panels, rereading cover stories, and cross-referencing SBS answers like I'm building a legal case against a cartoon octopus. This is fine. This is my problem, not yours. But I'm going to use that obsession to cut through fandom myth-making and show you what is actually on the page, because once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. And the next section is where we start building the toolset you're going to need. So before we start accusing your favorite little guy of selling the crew out to Emu, we need to do something extremely unsexy. We need to define our terms. Because right now, the community throws around foreshadowing, and Oda planned this from chapter 1, the way Usopp throws out lies. Constantly, confidently, with zero quality control. Someone posts 2 panels 10 years apart, the poses kind of rhyme, and suddenly it's proof that Sanji was always meant to overthrow Judge and become king of Germa. Listen to me. If every visual echo, every coincidence, every reused joke is foreshadowing, then nothing is. That's the problem. If we don't agree on what counts as intentional, then arguing about a straw hat traitor is pointless. You're playing 3 different games with one word on the box. One person is talking about strict, planned setups. Another is talking about clever improv. A third is just a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast and then writes a 40-tweet thread about how the toast proves Zoro is from Wano. None of these are the same category of storytelling move, but we mash them together and call it all Oda's 5D chess. So here's the thing. I'm going to steal a framework from narrative theory, and then I'm going to bend it until it screams, because One Piece is not a neatly plotted novel written in one go. It's a weekly shonen marathon. Oda is drawing, revising, firefighting health issues, and answering SBS questions about Sanji's eyebrow direction all at the same time. That production reality matters. It changes what planned can realistically mean. In this video, I'm going to talk about 3 categories. First, genuine foreshadowing, the classical version, where the author intentionally plants information early because they already know the payoff. You put the gun on the mantelpiece in Act 1 because you know someone's getting shot in Act 3. Laboon and Brook. Nika silhouettes and Gear 5. That's gun on mantle foreshadowing. Second, retrofitting. When the author looks back at some random vase in the corner and goes, "Wait, I can brain somebody with that." Suddenly the background prop becomes the murder weapon. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is normal. Most long series survive on this. You introduce Kanjuro as a weirdo theatre kid, and years later you realize he can be the perfect traitor if you reinterpret his bad drawings as deliberate sabotage. Same panels, new meaning, different level of intent. And then there's the third thing. The thing I need you to really lock in before we start accusing Robin's side-eye of treason. I'm calling it pre-writing. That's when the author knows the ending, knows the major reveals, before Chapter 1 ever hits the magazine, and serialization is just revealing that decision out of order. If foreshadowing is Chekhov's gun on the mantelpiece, and retrofitting is turning the vase into a weapon, pre-writing is realizing the entire house was built around a hidden safe you installed years ago. So when we talk about traitor moments on the Sunny, we're going to sort them: gun, vase, or secret safe. Because if you don't know which category a moment falls into, you will absolutely misread both how much danger the crew is in and what Oda is actually trying to do to you. So to even talk about a straw hat traitor, we need to clean up the word that's been absolutely abused by this community: foreshadowing. I need you to hear this, because if we get this wrong, every panel of Sanji smoking in the rain becomes evidence of 12 different conspiracies. Foreshadowing, in the strict, boring, grown-up literary sense, is when an author intentionally plants a detail because they already know the payoff they're walking toward. Not, "This could pay off someday." Not, "That'd be neat to reuse." Already. Decided. The setup exists because the ending exists in the author's head. Here's the thing. That means the direction of causality is reversed from how fans usually talk about it. The future event doesn't happen because the gun was on the wall. The gun is on the wall because the author has already written in their outline or brain the scene where somebody gets shot in Act 3. Foreshadowing is evidence of a prior decision, not a future whim. Take the classic example, Act 1, there's a gun hanging on the mantle. It's framed, mentioned, maybe even joked about. Act 3, someone grabs that exact gun in a moment of desperation and fires it. Real foreshadowing is the author putting the gun there only because they've already planned that later scene. It's not a random background prop that, years later, they flip open the volume and go, "Oh hey, gun, that's convenient." That second thing, that's retrofitting. Different category, different level of intent. Why does this matter for traitor theories? Because if Oda truly planned a Straw Hat traitor from early on, we should see certain kinds of consistent, low-key setups that don't quite make sense any other way. Not just Robin is ominous sometimes, or Usopp runs away a lot. We're talking about little guns on the Sunny's walls that only become necessary if betrayal is already baked into the blueprint. And listen to me, most competent storytellers use basic foreshadowing constantly. This is normal. This is fine. You plan a twist 2 arcs ahead. You seed a line of dialogue. You park a ship exactly where it needs to sink later. But the more distant and the more specific the payoff gets, this character will betray the crew in year 25 at the start of the final war. The rarer genuine long-term planning becomes, That is not casual Saturday afternoon drafting. That is spreadsheet, corkboard, I scare my editor territory. So for the rest of this video, we need to carry 3 quiet criteria in the back of your head: intent, specificity, necessity. Was this detail clearly intentional? Is it specific to Betrayal rather than just general character flavor? And crucially, does the story need it to be there for the planned payoff to work? Because if a suspicious straw hat moment can be fully explained as comedy, personality, or odor just doing a gag, this is not a sin. This is just how his storytelling functions. It's probably not pure foreshadowing. It might still be retrofit fuel. It might still hurt when he uses it later. But if we're hunting a real traitor, we have to separate the wall decorations from the one gun he cannot afford to forget. And once you apply that filter to the series, one crew member's weird little moments stop being cute and start reading like someone quietly loading that gun, and that someone quietly loading the gun feeling. That's where retrofitting quietly walks on stage. Retrofitting is when an author looks back at something they wrote years ago and decides, in the present, to assign it new meaning or hook it into a twist they only recently nailed down. Not a vague vibe, a specific new decision laid over old material. You had a throwaway gag, you had a random line, and 10 years later you go, "Oh, that's actually childhood trauma now." Here's the thing. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. In a weekly manga running for more than 1,000 chapters, this is survival. You are not a time-traveling god. You are a sleep-deprived human trying to keep a billion spinning plates in the air while your editor yells about page counts. Retrofitting is how you create the illusion of insane, 20-year pre-planning without actually knowing in 1999 what you're going to draw in 2026. Generalization, then example. Imagine an early volume where a character spits out carrots and everyone laughs. Ha, he hates carrots, what a weirdo. That's it. No chart on the wall. No secret document titled Carrot Trauma Saga. Then, 10 years later, the author decides that gag is actually rooted in a childhood starvation incident where he had to steal rotten vegetables. Suddenly, the joke becomes a scar. Was that hatred of carrots originally intentional foreshadowing? No. It was retrofit fuel that got lit later. And this is normal. This is fine. The problem only shows up when the retrofit contradicts what we already know. Bad retrofitting feels stapled on. It breaks the internal logic the story taught you to trust. Good retrofitting feels inevitable, almost smug. You flip back, you see the old panel, and you swear the author must have planned it from day one. That's Oda's specialty. He retrofits so cleanly that the community mislabels it as foreshadowing. Listen to me. The difference is whether the payoff was actually planned when the setup first appeared. Foreshadowing is intentional from the start. Retrofitting is opportunistic. Both can be brilliant. Both can hurt you. But if you confuse the two, you start treating every old eyebrow twitch as a signed confession. Which brings us back to Traitor talk. When fans post a suspicious Robin panel or a weird Usopp expression and declare, "Proof she's been the government's mole since Whiskey Peak," what they are really doing is handing Oda a buffet of retrofittable material. He may not have locked in a specific Straw Hat traitor in 2002. He absolutely has given himself options that can be weaponized later without breaking anything. Pattern interrupt. What if your favorite evidence isn't evidence at all, but spare parts? The little inconsistencies, the offhand gags, The ominous shadows around Jinbe's obligations or Sanji's family. Those might not be a finished blueprint. They might be a toolbox. And if Oda decides the story needs one of these idiots to sell out the crew in the final saga, he can reach back, grab a piece, and retrofit it into the perfect soul-crushing betrayal. Which means the real question is not, did he plan a traitor from day one? We need to ask, who is structurally easiest to retrofit into a traitor without breaking one piece? And that's where one specific Straw Hat starts to stand out. And before we start pointing fingers at specific Straw Hats, we need to talk about something way less sexy, scheduling. I need you to actually picture what it means to be a weekly manga author in Jump, because the way our community talks about Oda planned this traitor from chapter 1 assumes he's a time-traveling god, not a human being chained to a desk. You're drawing 15 to 20 pages every week for decades. That's thumbnails, pencils, inks, backgrounds, screen tones, corrections, plus supervising assistants so they don't turn Zoro's swords into pool noodles. On top of that, you've got editorial meetings where someone in a suit is asking, can we speed this up? Can we slow this down? Can we add more cool panels for the anime? This is not a chill cottagecore writing retreat. This is a factory. Here's the thing. That factory has levers you don't control. Reader surveys come in every week. Magazine sales go up and down. The anime catches up and suddenly Toei needs padding, which means the manga needs splashier moments they can stretch. An editor can walk in and say, Alabaster's hot, keep it going, or Wano's dragging, cut that subplot. And your grand 20-year traitor chessboard just got flipped onto the floor. Now imagine, in that environment, having every traitor twist locked in from chapter 1. Not just someone will betray the crew, but which Straw Hat, at what island, what line they say, which panel it mirrors from Eni's lobby, and how that dovetails with Imu, the ancient weapons, and Egghead's science horror. No flexibility, no ability to pivot when a character lands better than expected, or the magazine wants more of them. That isn't genius. That is creative suicide. A long-running weekly series is not a stone tablet. It is wet cement that never fully dries. You sketch a roadmap, you plant the big mysteries, and then you constantly adjust. A traitor who was planned in broad strokes can become a different traitor. A gag about a dragon can become Wano trauma. This is normal. This is fine. And when an author reaches back and repurposes an old detail for a new reveal, that's retrofitting, not some moral failure of storytelling. So we need to stop pretending that not 100% master planned means random improv. Most manga live in that middle category, a flexible outline plus a ton of retrofits. You have anchor points, but how you sail between them can and will change based on health, editors, and whether the audience cares more about lore this year than Kid. Oda is an outlier because he does have those terrifying pre-written anchor points. The ending, the void century, the will of D, the shape of the final war. But he's still inside the same brutal machine, which means the Straw Hat traitor, if it exists, has to sit at the intersection of both systems, pre-written enough to feel inevitable, flexible enough to be retrofitted in without snapping the story in half. And that's where his weirder approach starts to matter. And here's where the weirder approach actually hurts you. Because once you know Oda is juggling both pre-writing and on-the-fly problem-solving, you start to see the pattern in the community. Someone screenshots a vaguely suspicious panel, posts it next to a final saga reveal and declares, "See? He planned the Straw Hat Traitor from chapter 120. Listen to me. You do this. I do this. We are all the pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. We find a panel of, say, Robin in shadow, or Sanji smoking alone on the rail, and we immediately promote it to 4D chess. Not, that's an interesting mood shot, but this is the exact moment Oda decided who would betray the crew. And then we stack 10 more screenshots on top of that assumption and call it a theory. Here's the thing, that first leap is usually where the wheels come off. Foreshadowing, in the strict sense, requires prior intent. The author has already decided on the payoff. They plant a detail now, because they know precisely what it will mean later. Retrofitting is a different category. That's when the author looks back at an old, flexible detail and says, "Oh, I can turn that into something," without violating what's already on the page. The panel didn't carry that meaning when it was drawn. The meaning arrived later. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is in fact how most long serials survive. You leave yourself movable furniture. Early mentions of the Shichibukai, the Yonko, those were clearly real ideas, but they were also roomy containers. 7 government-backed pirates and 4 monsters ruling the seas are specific enough to feel intentional, but vague enough that Oda can decide later who fills the chairs, how powerful they are, and how they connect to the endgame. And I need you to notice what that does to traitor discourse. If you misclassify those roomy containers as ironclad foreshadowing, you start telling yourself, the Straw Hat Traitor role was locked in from East Blue, and every weird panel is proof. Suddenly, Sanji's bounty typo, Robin's absences, Usopp's lies, Jinbe's history with Big Mum, all get dragged into a courtroom where the verdict was written before the trial. You're not asking, did Oda plan this character as the traitor? You're asking, how can I reinterpret everything they've ever done to fit the traitor I already picked? This is fine. This is normal. It's fun fandom behavior. The problem is when we use that behavior as evidence about Oda's process. Because if a lot of these clues are actually retrofits or opportunistic reuses of old panels, then the Straw Hat Traitor, if it exists, isn't a sacred tablet from 1997. It's a decision that could have been made shockingly late without breaking anything. So here's the uncomfortable question. Are you actually ready to have some of your favorite Oda planned this from the beginning moments reclassified as retrofits? And if I can show you that shift, does that make you more impressed with him or way less? Because the answer to that is going to decide how you read the next set of evidence I'm about to ruin for you. So before you start sharpening pitchforks for your favorite straw hat, I need you to step into a safer battlefield, Naruto. Because the cleanest, least emotionally dangerous example of this whole problem is the Toby twist. Quick recap so we're on the same page. Toby shows up as this goofy, masked Akatsuki clown. He's doing pratfalls, talking in third person, getting bonked by Deidara. Then the mask comes off and suddenly he's Obito, Kakashi's dead teammate. Tragic war victim, emotionally nuclear backstory. Overnight, the community goes from, "Who is this meme?" to forensic investigators combing through every panel he's ever stood in. And immediately, the foreshadowing threads explode. You get the hair comparisons. Toby's spiky silhouette versus Obito's. The speech patterns. The way he slips into more serious old addiction when the mask cracks. The suspiciously detailed knowledge of Konoha's history and Kakashi's habits. And of course, that one panel everyone posts as the smoking gun. Toby standing over Naruto's team, sharing a page composition that mirrors Obito's old Team Minato shot. Same layout, same positions, circled in red 400 times on Twitter. On the surface, it looks airtight. It feels intentional. It feels planned from day one. This is the fantasy the fandom wants. The author as 4D chess mastermind, secretly winking at us through negative space and hair spikes. Except, here's the thing. When you actually look at Kishimoto's interviews and the production timeline, the story gets messier. He's admitted Toby's identity went through multiple candidates. At different stages, Toby was going to be Madara for real, then some new guy, then connected to Kakashi somehow. You can see the uncertainty in the writing if you're not busy being a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast every time 2 panels rhyme. Once you accept that, a lot of those hints slide into a different category. The hair? That's just generic Konoha boy hair that can be retrofitted to Obito later. The goofy personality? A mask, in both the literal and narrative sense, that works for any secret boss reveal. The knowledge of Konoha? Standard villain exposition that becomes eerie once you attach Obito to it. Even that famous mirrored panel reads less as divine foreshadowing and more as Kishimoto going, "Oh, I can echo this old composition now that I've decided who he is." That's retrofitting. The author leaves things ambiguous, designs a flexible silhouette, and only later snaps a specific identity into place. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is normal serialized storytelling under deadline. And if we, as a community, can swallow that for Naruto without declaring the series ruined, we need to be open to the same move in One Piece. Some of the evidence you're hoarding for a straw hat traitor. It might be Oda deliberately leaving himself options rather than telegraphing a fixed decision from chapter 100. Because once you see how Toby works, you start asking a much scarier question. Which straw hat panels are genuinely pre-written foreshadowing, and which are empty masks Oda can choose to fill later? So here's where we need to untangle 2 completely different questions, because the community keeps mashing them together into one emotional ball of yarn. 1. Did the author plan this twist from the very start? 2. Did the twist actually wreck you when it landed? Those are not the same question. They live in different parts of your brain. Take Toby being Obito. For a lot of Naruto fans, that reveal hit hard. The goggles, the rock, Kakashi's guilt, the name Obito echoing through the war. Massive emotional payoff. You can hate the execution later, but in the moment, for many people, it worked. Now, separate that from the technical category question. Was Toby equals Obito meticulously foreshadowed from Kakashi Gaiden? Or was Kishimoto retrofitting earlier pieces once he committed? Because here's the thing. When you go back, you can see the seams. The shift in personalities, the mask design changes, the interviews where Kishimoto admits Toby's identity moved around. That's not pre-written foreshadowing. That's an author reinterpreting old material and stitching a new face onto it. And yet, for the readers who sobbed over Obito, the emotional truth of the twist doesn't vanish just because the spreadsheet category changed from planned since chapter 1 to decided midway. I need you to really sit with that. Retrofitting, when done well, can actually create stronger payoffs. Precisely because the author is responding to what's working in the story and in the fandom. You test characters. You notice which dynamics catch fire. You realize, oh, this side character everyone is obsessed with. That's my traitor. That's my tragic backstory. The twist ends up tailored to the living, breathing version of the narrative, not the hypothetical version you sketched in a notebook 10 years ago. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is, in fact, how most long-form storytelling survives weekly publication without collapsing into sludge. The problem is when we, as pattern-seeking monkeys who see Jesus in toast and foreshadowing in every eyebrow raise, insist that every single payoff must have been planned from page 1 or it doesn't count. When you do that, you flatten the craft. You turn Oda into a robot running a decades-long script instead of a human author juggling deadlines, editors, reader polls, and his own changing interests. You erase the very real skill of noticing, mid-run. Oh, if I bend this earlier panel, I can make a devastating reveal here. You are basically banning one of the most powerful tools in serialized writing because it offends your headcanon of pure intention. Pattern interrupt. If I told you Kanjuro is structurally a retrofit that was then backfilled with retroactive foreshadowing, would that make the betrayal scene in Onigashima hurt less? For some of you, yes, because you've tied your emotional experience to a technical category. For others, no, because the payoff lives in the performance, the drawings, the theatre, the years of fake loyalty. Listen to me. Demystifying the process does not make Oda less impressive. It makes his juggling act under weekly constraints even more insane. When we later poke at Straw Hat behaviour, when we ask whether some betrayals are pre-written foreshadowing or elegantly disguised retrofits, it might feel uncomfortable. It might sandblast some Oda is an omniscient god mythology. This is fine. This is normal, because the real flex isn't that he planned every tear you've cried from chapter 1. The real flex is that he can move, adjust, and still make you cry on command. So if Oda isn't an omniscient god, and he isn't just winging it week to week, what is he actually doing? We need to put a label on the weird third thing that's happening, because without that label, the traitor conversation just turns into people yelling foreshadowing and coincidence at each other in all caps. Here's the thing. There isn't a neat academic term for what Oda does. I went digging. I did the dork homework. Nothing fit. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to call it pre-writing. Not in the high school essay sense of scribbling an outline, but as its own category of storytelling behaviour. Pre-writing in this context is when an author saturates the world with dense, suggestive fragments, backstory shards, visual motifs, character quirks that are very specific but deliberately open-ended. They're not fully mapped to a payoff yet. They're designed so he can later promote them into either true foreshadowing or a clean retrofit, depending on what the story ends up needing. The difference matters. Classic foreshadowing is, I know the gun will fire in Act 3, so I hang it on the wall in Act 1. Retrofitting is, oh, there's a random vase in Act 1, what if I say it was cursed all along? Pre-writing is sneakier. The gun on the wall is real, it's detailed, it's drawn with care. But Oda hasn't decided yet whether it's going to shoot, misfire, or be revealed as a water pistol. It's a loaded possibility. Listen to me. You've seen this with Blackbeard. Early on we get, his body is weird, the no-sleep gag, the multiple darkness panels. Those details are too pointed to be meaningless. But you can feel they weren't fully systematized from day one. They're hooks. When Oda finally decides, okay, he has an abnormal body that can house multiple fruits, those old moments get upgraded. Retroactively, they read as flawless foreshadowing. Functionally, they started as pre-writing. Same with the Void Century. We had poneglyphs, forbidden history, Roger hearing the voices of all things long before any of that was nailed down on the page. Specific, intentional, but elastic. He could tighten or redirect them as the endgame crystallized. This is not a sin. This is normal. This is how a weekly author survives for 25 years without their brain melting out of their ears. And Oda is an outlier in how aggressively he does this. Most authors sprinkle a few hooks and pray. Oda oversees the garden. Every island, every cover story, every SBS answer is a pile of Chekhov's guns, knives, and emotionally compromised houseplants waiting to be claimed by future plot. Which brings us back to the Straw Hats. Because if pre-writing is real, and it is, then some of their most suspicious behaviors and half-told histories might not be proof of a traitor yet. They might be Oda giving himself the option to flip one of them into a traitor if the story demands it. I need you to sit with how evil that is. If Robin's gaps, Usopp's lies, Sanji's double lives, Jinbe's secrets, or even Luffy's impossible luck are pre-writing, then the crew isn't just a found family. They're a curated minefield. And in the next section, we're going to start stepping on specific panels that suddenly look a lot more dangerous than you remember. So now that we've turned the Sunny into a minefield, we need to zoom out. Because this isn't happening in a vacuum. In One Piece, betrayal isn't a twist. Betrayal is infrastructure. It's load-bearing. Run the tape from Alabasta onward, and you start to feel a pattern digging its claws in. Cobra's kingdom doesn't just have some Baroque works agents hanging around. It's riddled with Crocodile's people, from the royal guard to the casino staff, with Robin herself as the ultimate insider whose job is to smile, translate, and then stab the dream in the back. Water 7 doesn't just have some government dudes show up. CP9 has been living as shipwrights for years, clocking every blueprint, every friendship, every weakness. That's not flavor. That's pre-written architecture. Marineford. Same deal, different category. Whitebeard doesn't fall because he's old. He falls because Squad, a man who owes him everything, gets surgically targeted and flipped. The emotional core of that war is not, wow, big punches. It's watching a son drive a sword through the one person who never betrayed him. Dressrosa runs the same software. Doflamingo's agents are woven into the Colosseum, the toy factory, the royal family history. Everyone is compromised from the inside out before Luffy ever throws a punch. And then Wano just rips the mask off. Kanjuro isn't a random traitor reveal Oda pulled out of a hat. The man's entire performance, from the fake incompetence to the conveniently botched plans, retroactively clicks into place. Egghead doubles down again. York isn't a new villain. She's a shard of Vegapunk that was always in the room, always hearing the plans, always in position to sell them. The leaks about the incident? They're not a whoops. They're the point. Here's the thing, these aren't just plot conveniences. This is Oda's favorite emotional weapon. He keeps putting you in scenarios where the damage hurts more because it came from someone who was already inside the trust circle. He could have done 1,000 external ambushes. Instead, he keeps choosing the insider knife. Intentionally, repeatedly. And yet, notice who's always adjacent to this pattern but never actually inside it. The Straw Hats show up and get caught in other people's betrayals. They befriend Vivi while her kingdom rots from spies. They ally with Iceberg while his company is infested with CP9. They fight beside Whitebeard while Squad folds. They sail with the Scabbards while Kanjuro is painting death flags. They walk into Egghead while York is already cashing out. The main crew is always standing near the blast radius. They never eat the full shrapnel. If you're an author this obsessed with the cost of trust, with the pain of being sold out by your own, having the central found family skate through 1,000 plus chapters without paying that tax is weird. Structurally weird. Thematically weird. From a pre-writing perspective, it's the one unpaid invoice in a series that otherwise itemizes every consequence. So when I say the Straw Hats already have a traitor, I'm not just being a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. I'm saying there is only one major faction in One Piece that hasn't paid the betrayal tax yet, and Oda does not leave debts unpaid. So if betrayal is a debt, we need to look at the first payments Oda ever made. Because he didn't start with Kanjuro, he started with Alabasta. Alabasta is Oda sitting you down and saying, "Here's how my world breaks your trust." Baroque Works isn't just a goofy mafia organization. It's a web of infiltrators threaded through Vivi's entire life. Her kingdom isn't toppled by some giant invading army. It rots from the inside. The dance powder plot, the staged rebellions, the planted agents in the Royal Guard. That's all foreshadowing for a very specific emotional punch. The enemy was already in the room before chapter 1 of that saga even started. Here's the thing. On a structural level, Alabasta is a rehearsal for internal betrayal. First, Oda builds safety and camaraderie. Vivi joins the crew. They risk their lives for her. We get the Duck Squad, the banter, the friends across borders energy. Then the reveal. Baroque Works has been in her government, in her army, in her people's heads for years. And then, crucially, the heroes are forced to fight citizens and soldiers who technically are not evil. They're just following lies whispered by people they trusted. Water 7 and Eni's lobby crank that pattern to 11. CP9 hiding inside Galila is the upgraded version of Baroque Works hiding in Alabasta. Rob Lucci isn't introduced as a shadowy assassin. He's the weird pigeon guy. Kaku is the square-nosed goof doing parkour building inspections. They're competent, they're funny, they're framed as allies. Oda weaponizes exactly the kind of side character the community usually writes off as harmless comic relief. And then he flips them. Hard. The shipwright friends reveal themselves as world government assassins. And suddenly, every warm scene in the earlier chapters gets refiled in your brain under a different category. Surveillance, manipulation, pre-written betrayal. The emotional structure is the same 3-beat rhythm as Alabasta. Build safety, reveal the rot, force confrontation with people you were just laughing with. Listen to me. This is not a sin. This is not cheap shock writing. This is Oda stress testing a specific storytelling pattern until you internalize it. By the time Robin is dragged to Eni's lobby, the real cruelty isn't that CP9 exists. It's that the Straw Hats have to punch through the very institutions and faces they had started to trust in Water 7 just to get their Nakama back. Now zoom out and apply that rhythm to the Straw Hats themselves. Oda has spent 1,000 chapters framing them as the ultimate found family. Shared meals, shared dreams, shared backstories, the whole "I'll stake my life on yours" package. From a pre-writing perspective, that is the perfect safety net to yank. You build the most secure emotional space in the story. You let fans live there for decades. And then you reveal that one thread in that tapestry was always pointed at the world government, or Blackbeard, or someone worse. I need you to see Alabasta and Water 7 not as isolated tragedies, but as rehearsals, training wheels, Oda teaching you what betrayal feels like in his world, so that when he finally runs that same play on the Sunny, you'll recognize the pattern one beat too late. And the messed up part, he's already started laying the pieces for that game. But to see those pieces, we have to talk about specific straw hats, and the panels that stop being wholesome the second you assume one of them is lying. So when I say Oda has been running betrayal drills on you for 20 years, I'm not being dramatic. He's scaling the same narrative trick over and over, just turning the knife a little deeper each time. And if you track that escalation, you end up in one very uncomfortable place. The Sunny. Start at Marineford. Squad is not some mastermind. He's a blunt instrument with a tragic backstory and a very simple brain. Whitebeard good, Roger bad. Akainu walks up, presses on the scar tissue, and suddenly Squad is driving a sword through the chest of the man who literally gave him a future. That's not random. That is emotional manipulation as weaponized game design. The author is showing you how easily an ally, a beneficiary of a captain's kindness, can be flipped into a traitor with the right story in his ear. And here's the thing. Squad's betrayal is public and short-term. One conversation, one stab, one arc. It hurts, but it's a spectacle. You watch the blood spray, you watch Whitebeard forgive him instantly, and you go, wow, what a dad. Then you move on. The betrayal is huge in scale but shallow in intimacy. It's a broadcast, not a whisper. Dressrosa tightens that lens. Doflamingo doesn't have one squad. He has an entire island built on treachery. His agents are embedded everywhere. Toys in your house? Spies? Waiters in your bar? Spies? Your own memories? Gone. Betrayal stops being a single act and becomes the air everyone breathes. The problem isn't that one guy turned. The problem is that the system is designed so you can't even trust your own recollection of who you loved yesterday. That's a different category of horror. That's betrayal as infrastructure. And then Wano goes, cool. Now what if that infrastructure is wearing a kimono and has been your friend for decades? Enter Kanjuro. I need you to remember how long we rode with this man. Punk Hazard, Dressrosa, Zoo, whole cake in the background. Years of panel time, running gags, failures, convenient separations, off-screen errands. All of it retroactively relabeled as enemy action. The brush, the perfectly timed captures, the way he always happened to be missing when key intel leaked. Once the mask drops, every prior scene is contaminated. That's the escalation curve. Marineford gives you a pawn turned by a single conversation. Dressrosa gives you kingdom-level embedded agents and memory erasure. Wano gives you a decades-long mole sitting in every group shot, smiling. From army scale to nation scale to found family scale. From we were allies this war to we shared meals, trauma and dreams. And listen to me, Oda is not doing this by accident. This is intentional pacing. He keeps moving the betrayal closer to the narrative heart, testing how much trust he can rip away before the community riots. Squad hurts Whitebeard. Dressrosa hurts an entire country. Kanjuro hurts the scabbards and by extension the Kozuki dream. So what's left? What is the only escalation that actually tops decades-long companion reveal? It's obvious. The next logical step in this foreshadowing ladder is not another side alliance, not another temporary fleet member, but the core crew. The Straw Hats are the one found family that has not yet paid the betrayal tax. And if you accept that Oda plans his storytelling moves in advance, then we need to finally ask the question he's been quietly aiming us toward. Which dream on that ship was always a lie? Because the pattern says someone's is. And right on cue, the moment Oda finally lets that question hang in the air, he ships us to the laboratory from hell and makes traitor the word of the arc. Egghead is not subtle about this. The central mystery is literally, someone on the island keeps feeding the world government information. The Vegapunk research gets erased, Cypher Pole agents vanish, and then suddenly the Gorosei know way too much, way too fast. Every few chapters, another "how did they know that?" beat drops. The transponder snails are monitored. The frontier dome glitches. The Seraphim get hijacked. There is an internal enemy, and we are told, very explicitly, to start hunting. And Oda hands us a perfect closed circle of suspects, the satellites. Shaka, Atlas, Edison, Pythagoras, Lilith, York. One brain, 6 bodies, all sharing authority, all theoretically loyal to the same Dr. Vegapunk identity. On paper, this should be the safest group in the story. In practice, it's a firing squad of red herrings. Every time a system fails or a call goes out, we cycle through the same question. Which one of these faces is lying to us? Here's the thing. He doesn't stop at the lab coats. For a hot second, the arc even weaponizes the Straw Hat's presence. The world government moves with such surgical timing that you're pushed to ask, did someone leak their route? Did someone want them here? The community did what it always does and turned into a pattern-seeking monkey that sees Jesus in toast. Suddenly, every panel of Robin near a terminal or Sanji messing with communications becomes evidence. This is not a sin. This is normal. Oda is counting on that paranoia. Because structurally, Egghead is Dressrosa meets Water 7 run through a traitor motif blender. Repeated system failures, off-screen conversations, convenient absences. Even the way York is framed before the reveal, goofy, background, low stakes, echoes Kanjuro's entire existence as a walking decoy. When York steps out as the world government's inside woman, it's not just a twist. It's a rehearsal. It's Oda reminding you what it feels like when the ally category suddenly flips. And I need you to clock the timing. This is the first island of the final saga. The author could have done a pure lore dump here. Pure void century exposition. Instead, he burns page time on a whodunit about internal betrayal. That is intentional. He is refreshing the traitor subroutine in your brain right before we sail into Elbaf, Emu, Ancient Weapons, all the endgame toys. Water 7 taught us how it feels when your ship and crewmate betray you so he could later pull a real Kanjuro. Egghead is that same training montage, but now the target silhouette is bigger. If every new setting makes us play Spot the Traitor, why would he spare the one setting that matters most, the Sunny itself? Because here's the thing. Once you aim that traitor silhouette at the Sunny, you're not just playing a guessing game anymore. You're messing with the core operating system of One Piece. After Marineford, after Wano, after the Reverie, you can't just bump the enemy's power level and call it escalation. We've already seen gods, dragons, and a man whose job description is literally press world reset. Bigger beams are not enough. Stakes escalation in long-running writing has to go sideways, not just upwards. Marineford escalated scale, The Reverie escalated scope. 1-0 escalated history. The final saga has to escalate emotion. It has to ask, what happens when the one safe category in the story, the Straw Hat found family, stops being structurally safe? You don't raise the bar by throwing Luffy at a stronger wall. You raise it by making us doubt the ground he's standing on. And a Straw Hat traitor is the cleanest, most intentional way to do that without breaking Luffy as a character. A lot of fans hear betrayal and instantly picture edgy, grimdark Luffy who never trusts anyone again. That's not happening. That would contradict 25 years of planned storytelling. What you do instead is force Luffy to keep trusting in the face of betrayal, to double down on his ideals while we, the community of pattern-seeking monkeys, are screaming that this is insane. The illusion that this crew is invincible emotionally gets shattered, but the ideology that built it stays intact. Now plug that into the actual endgame pieces. Emu, the ancient weapons, the final war. Those aren't punch-harder problems. They're information problems. Who knows the Void Century? Who can locate Pluton? Who can weaponize the will of D? That's all about leverage, secrets and timing. Where does that kind of leverage hurt the most? Not in Mariajois, not in Hachinosu, but on the Thousand Sunny. Right next to the guy who laughs while he declares war on the world. A traitor on the crew is the perfect narrative router. They can feed Imu positions, relay poneglyph rubbings, sabotage alliances, even nudge Luffy toward the wrong island at the right time. Suddenly every gag argument about navigation or log poses becomes retroactive foreshadowing. This is not a sin. This is how Oda already handled Kanjuro, Blackbeard's weird body, even York on Egghead. Long-term setups that reframe mundane panels as loaded evidence. And if he does it with the Straw Hat, he gets to weaponize everything he's built. Dreams become bargaining chips, backstories become pressure points, promises become handcuffs. The Going Merry and the Sunny stop being just ships we cried over and turn into symbols of how far Luffy's faith can be exploited before it breaks. Imagine a crewmate using the very dream Luffy swore to protect as the excuse to sell him out. That's not just a twist. That's 20+ years of foreshadowing detonating in one scene. So I need you to actually answer this in your head. If Oda has spent an entire career obsessing over the cost of trust, Nami, Robin, Law, Kanjuro, Squad, and the Straw Hats never truly pay that cost themselves, is that thematically satisfying to you? Does this story really end with trust is dangerous, except for the main characters? They get a discount? Or are we all quietly waiting for the moment he proves we were wrong to feel safe? Because once we start naming names, and we are going to name names, you're going to realize some of your favorite wholesome panels read very different if one Straw Hat has been working against the crew from the start. So before you start pausing every panel and circling Nami's side-eye in red, we need to set some ground rules. Because once the word traitor enters the conversation, your brain, my brain, all our brains do the same thing. We turn into pattern-seeking monkeys who see Jesus in toast and government conspiracies in a slightly raised eyebrow. This is not a moral failing. This is not a sin. This is how your brain is wired. You're built to connect dots, even when the author didn't put any dots there on purpose. And in a story as dense as One Piece, that instinct goes into overdrive, because every page is wall-to-wall detail, And the community has spent 25 years being rewarded for noticing things. So here's the thing. If we don't draw a line, every gag face becomes foreshadowing. Every offhand SBS joke becomes secret confirmation. And suddenly, Chopper sneezing on panel is evidence he's reporting to Imu. I need you to hear this. Not every suspicious panel is meaningful. Not every weird expression is planned setup. Some of it is just Oda being a gremlin with a pen. For this video, I'm only counting something as real evidence if it hits a few criteria. First, repetition. One moment can be a fluke. 3 variations on the same beat across sagas starts to smell intentional. Second, context. Does the panel happen at a structurally important moment, or is it wedged between Sanji's nosebleeds and Brook asking to see panties? Third, does it do double duty in the storytelling? The strongest foreshadowing scenes are always earning their keep right now, while secretly pointing at later. Pattern interrupt. Comedy is not immune, but comedy is weak on its own. A one-off joke of Usopp bragging or Robin doing a deadpan horror gag is not traitor confirmed. This is fine. This is normal. Oda loves stupid faces. Until a gag is echoed in a serious frame or backed by an author comment, it lives in the funny but inadmissible in court category. And I'm applying this standard to everyone. I need you to understand that I am not here to slander your favorite for engagement farming. I'm here to see who the author has actually positioned as flippable in the pre-writing. That means Robin's world government baggage, Usopp's chronic lying, Sanji's underworld family, Jinbe's ex-warlord status, even Luffy's weird connection to Nika all get run through the same filter. The downside is obvious. Some very popular suspect theories are going to get downgraded. A lot of top 10 Straw Hat traitor clues are, at best, pre-writing potential. Details Oda could weaponize later, but not hard foreshadowing yet. The upside is that what survives this purge is terrifyingly strong. And once we apply those rules and see which moments refuse to go away, that's when one Straw Hat starts to look less wholesome crewmate and more ticking time bomb Oda armed on day one. And once we have that ticking time bomb idea in your head, there's only one place to start. It's Robin. It was always Robin. And if your first instinct is, that's too obvious, good. That means Oda has already done half the psychological groundwork on you. Here's the thing. Nico Robin is the only Straw Hat whose entire backstory is a world government PowerPoint presentation. Baroque works officer, child fugitive, sole survivor of O'Hara. The one person on the planet who can read poneglyphs without needing a magic eyeball or a prophecy tattoo. From her first real appearance, the author brands her as contraband. She is a walking classified document with trauma, and both sides know it. The Straw Hats literally cannot reach Laugh-Tale without her. The world government cannot allow anyone to reach Laugh-Tale while she's breathing. That's not headcanon. That is explicitly stated, repeatedly, across Alabasta, Enies Lobby, and post-timeskip. Strategically, Robin is not a crewmate. She is a nuke that can talk. Now the community handwaves this because she already had her betrayal arc. Baroque works to Straw Hats, antagonist to ally. Problem solved, right? Except listen to me. That first flip is exactly what makes her the safest candidate for a second one. Not morally, narratively. You've already filed her under redeemed, so any new red flag gets auto-sorted into the tragic past. This is fine folder. Run back her entrance. She joins the crew in Alabasta under motives that are, at best, murky. She tries to die with Crocodile, then wakes up on the Going Merry and just asks to come along. No grand speech, no mutual dream, no shared sake cups. She inserts herself into the cast the way a Trojan horse inserts itself into city infrastructure. And Luffy, pattern-seeking monkey that he is, shrugs and says yes. Since then, Robin consistently operates on a different axis. She's the one slipping away from the group, meeting with revolutionaries off-panel, investigating poneglyphs alone, calmly suggesting morally grey options while everyone else is shouting about friendship. When she tells Frankie to burn the Pluton blueprints, that's not just a cool moment. That's a woman making a unilateral decision about a world-ending weapon. Eni's lobby is the apparent counter-argument, and I need you to sit with how well constructed that is. It is the arc that proves her loyalty in the loudest possible way. The whole crew storms the world government's front door screaming, "I want to live," on her behalf. But structurally, that arc also brands her as the ultimate bargaining chip. Every admiral, every Cypher Pole agent, every celestial dragon now has a mental sticky note. Hurt the Straw Hats by touching Robin. So we need to ask the uncomfortable question. If Oda wanted to do a betrayal twist that actually hurts, would he really burn Sanji or Usopp for that, when he's already spent 20 years telling you that Robin is the one piece both sides cannot lose? A second flip, under duress or ideology, doesn't just sting. It weaponizes the very moment that made you trust her. And once you see Robin that way, as an intentional pressure point, not just a sad archaeologist, it changes how you read every other harmless Straw Hat quirk. Once you start reading Robin as a pressure point, we need to sort her evidence pile. Because right now, the community just throws every ominous panel into the same blender and calls it foreshadowing. This is how you end up as a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast and a traitor in every reaction shot. So, first category, genuine foreshadowing, intentional planned framing. From Alabasta onward, Robin is introduced as dangerous and unreadable. Crocodile calls her an untrustworthy partner. The world government brands her the devil child, who must not be allowed to live. Every faction doesn't just want her dead or alive. They want her controlled. That's not random flavor. That's the author repeatedly telling you, this woman is a strategic asset, and whoever has her wins or loses history itself. Then you stack her knowledge of the Void Century and the way people talk about it. O'Hara is wiped out. CP9 calls her the last survivor who can read the stones. Ancient weapons, Will of D, the true history. All of that funnels through her. The narrative keeps hammering that she is needed. Needed by the government. Needed by pirates. Needed by Luffy. If you were planning a future betrayal, you would absolutely foreshadow it by making her the one piece nobody can afford to lose. Second category, retrofits. Here's the thing. Not every cool Robin detail is proof of a day one master plan. The expanded O'Hara flashback, the full scope of the Will of D, the later clarification that Poseidon and Pluton matter to a global war, those feel enhanced after the fact. Oda knew, history researcher who can read forbidden text from the start. Did he have every scholar name, tree, and Buster Call nuance sketched on day one? Probably not. This is not a sin. This is normal. He took an early concept and kept deepening it so that her importance scales with the story. Third category, pre-writing, the weird middle ground. I need you to look at all the moments where Robin's inner world is deliberately left opaque. Her goal gets summarized as, I want to live. But then what? She smiles at morally ambiguous allies, sits comfortably with Crocodile, Kuzan, even Law, and occasionally drops those ominous, almost predator-coded expressions around new information. Not outright evil, just uncomfortably calm around devils and gods. That's what pre-writing feels like. The author knows there is more to her desire than survival, but he's holding the card. He seeds vague hints. Her fascination with the true history, her willingness to be used as a bargaining chip, her acceptance of being hated without resolving them. The door stays cracked, never closed, and structurally, that's exactly how you'd build a character you might pivot into a reluctant traitor. You keep enough mystery that if you ever need to flip her, you can point back and say, "It was all there." If you don't flip her, she still reads as a tragic burden scholar. This is fine. She's plug and play. So no, Robin is not confirmed traitor. But if Oda decides the final saga needs one straw hat to betray under duress, ideology, or blackmail, she is the cleanest, most supported option on the board. The real problem for you and me is this. Once you see that structure on Robin, you start noticing the same architecture hiding under other straw hats. And once you notice that architecture on Robin, your brain does something dangerous. It starts drifting over to the long nose in the corner of the panel who keeps insisting he's the brave warrior of the sea while shaking in terror. Usopp is the dark horse traitor candidate that the community keeps laughing off, and I need you to stop doing that for 2 minutes. On paper, he's comic relief. Chronic liar, compulsive storyteller, serial inventor of personas. Sogeking, Sniper King, Captain Usopp on the Going Merry. He's constantly rewriting his own character sheet because he knows, and we know, that in a crew of monsters, he's the weakest link. That's not an insult. This is his role. The problem is when you combine that insecurity with Oda's obsession with structural foreshadowing. Because here's the thing, Usopp's lies keep coming true. This is not headcanon. This is a documented running gag that quietly mutated into a narrative weapon. He brags about having 8,000 followers back in Syrup Village, and hundreds of chapters later, he's literally worshipped as God Usopp in Dressrosa. He talks about meeting giants, going to a land in the sky, seeing a huge goldfish that poops islands. One by one, the story checks these boxes off. The author takes a throwaway lie and retroactively upgrades it into prophecy. So when you have a character whose entire bit is "I make things up," and the writing keeps rewarding that with reality, you are already blurring the category boundary between joke and fate. Now, visually, Oda is not subtle about where Usopp sits. Go back through key spreads. Arlong Park's iconic Walk to Nami. Water 7's rooftop standoffs. The post-Enies lobby flag burning. Even the crew reaction shots in Sabaody and Dressrosa. Usopp is very often on the edge of the panel, slightly behind, or literally turned away while the others face forward. You get these compositions where Luffy, Zoro and Sanji form a decisive triangle in the foreground, and Usopp is a beat behind, mouth open, eyes wide. That's intentional staging. It keeps reminding you that even among his friends, he is emotionally out of phase with the crew. Water 7 is the smoking gun. Oda already ran the Straw Hat betrayal scenario as a controlled experiment, and he picked Usopp as the test subject. One ship, one argument, one kid whose entire self-worth is stapled to the Going Merry. Luffy makes a captain's call, and Usopp's insecurity gets weaponized into open mutiny. He quits. He fights Luffy. He forces a duel to the death over a boat. This is not a gag. This is a prototype for how internal conflict can shatter the fantasy of unbreakable nakama. So when fans say, "No Straw Hat would ever betray Luffy," I need you to remember, one already did. The only difference between Water 7 and a final saga betrayal is scale. In Water 7, he crawls back under a mask, literally, as Soga King. In the endgame, that same cocktail of fear, resentment, and manipulation could be exploited by someone much worse than Kaku and Lucci. And this is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is exactly how you build the most emotionally plausible betrayer. The one who loves the crew but has already proven he can walk away. Which raises a harder question. If Oda has already tested the soft betrayal on Usopp, who does he hand the truly catastrophic one to? Which raises a harder question. If Oda has already tested the soft betrayal on Usopp, who does he hand the truly catastrophic one to? Listen to me. On paper, Usopp is the safest, most harmless answer in the world. He's the gag coward. The guy whose running away is so baked into the bit that the community treats it as a comfort food trope. He panics, he bolts, he lies to save face. This is fine. This is normal. Except when an author repeats a behavior that much, you have to at least ask whether it's just flavor or category setup. Here's the thing. Usopp doesn't just run away. Oda makes you watch him run away. Syrup Village, Alabasta, Skypiea, Eni's Lobby, Dressrosa, Whole Cake, Wano. We get this rhythm where everyone else charges and Usopp hesitates, rationalizes, invents some sniper support excuse. The writing keeps underlining the same beats. He's terrified, he lies about being braver than he is, and he feels painfully overshadowed by these monsters he calls friends. That's not one joke. That's a drum. Foreshadowing in this context wouldn't be a single ominous panel of Usopp smirking in the shadows. It's the emotional pattern. The guy who believes he's the weak link, who thinks he has to cheat, bluff, or disappear just to contribute. When you're looking for a plausible traitor, that's the exact psychological profile you circle in red. Now, retrofitting. I need you to imagine Oda in 5 years deciding, okay, time to pull the trigger. How hard would it actually be to reframe some of Usopp's classic coward moments as cover? All those times he's lost, separated, or scouting ahead. From a pure craft standpoint, the author could slide in a panel of a Denden Mushi, a shadowy contact, a silent transmission, and suddenly that gag absence in Water 7 or Dressrosa becomes a secret report to the wrong people. This is not a sin. This is how retrofits work when you've left yourself negative space to color in later. And then you have the pre-writing adjacent stuff. Soga King, the hero worship, the mask. Usopp literally constructs an alter ego to be the brave, decisive warrior he can't be as himself. That's funny on the surface. Underneath, it's a kid who thinks utility and bravery are costumes you put on, not things you are. Pattern interrupt. That is also exactly the kind of person who makes a terrible decision under pressure, and then hides behind a story about why it was necessary. Usopp is uniquely positioned for a tragic, temporary betrayal, because his whole arc is about cracking and then crawling back. He already broke with Luffy once over the going merry. He already made a selfish call, hurt everyone, and had to beg for forgiveness. Scale that from ship to crew's life or death, and you have the same story, weaponized. And that's why it would hurt. The relatability, the fear, the desperate need to matter. Those are the things that make fans love him. They're also the exact levers you'd pull if you wanted a betrayal that doesn't feel monstrous, just horribly human. Which then forces us to ask, if Oda has built that gun and left it on the mantle, is he really going to fire it on Usopp? Or is he saving that bullet for someone even worse? Or is he saving that bullet for someone even worse? Well, listen to me. If Usopp is the gun, you could maybe talk yourself into firing. Sanji is the gun that's already gone off in another room. We've seen the smoke. We've heard the scream. We're just pretending it was a party popper. Go back to Alabasta. Mr. Prince. That whole stretch is Sanji running a one-man espionage operation, while the rest of the crew is getting fed into Crocodile's meat grinder. He vanishes from the main group, operates under a fake name, talks to Crocodile on the transponder snail, and manipulates the entire casino from the shadows. He's the unseen variable, and he loves it. You can feel Oda grinning as he writes it, and you can feel Sanji grinning as he does it. That is not normal cook on a pirate ship behavior. That is spy fiction behavior. That is the author quietly testing, what happens if I run this character as a double agent template? The community treats Mr. Prince as a cool gag, but structurally, it's a proof of concept for betrayal from inside the team. And then, years later, Oda cashes that foreshadowing in with Germa 66. Suddenly, the suave secret operator persona isn't just flavor, it's genetic. Sanji comes from a family of war criminals who mass-produce soldiers, sell their services to whoever pays, and treat blood ties as a business asset. Judge literally tries to turn his son into a political bargaining chip. That's not just tragic backstory. That's a planned category of narrative risk attached to Sanji's DNA. This man is valuable as leverage. Whole Cake Island is Oda stress testing that risk. How fast can you isolate Sanji from the crew? Answer: 1 blackmail letter and a couple of exploding bracelets. How fast can you turn the crew's most self-sacrificing member into a weapon against Luffy? Answer: a single ultimatum about Zeph and a marriage photo. Sanji doesn't just get captured, he becomes the key that locks the Straw Hats out. He's the emotional Achilles heel, the pressure point you press if you want Luffy to bleed. Here's the thing, Sanji justifies all of this to himself as protection. He lies, he disappears, he makes unilateral deals with emperors, and he frames it as for their own good. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is, in fact, exactly how you'd write a reluctant traitor who can sleep at night. The problem isn't that he'd sell them out for money or power. The problem is that he'd sell himself out and drag them with him for love. So if Oda ever flips that switch again, I don't think we're looking at a 10-year hidden mole. I need you to understand this. We're looking at a one-arc meltdown, a forced turn where Sanji signs the devil's contract to save someone and becomes the enemy of the crew on paper while still being their crewmate in his own head. Maximum melodrama. Minimum permanent stain. And if that sounds too cruel, too surgical, too perfectly targeted at the fandom's heart, we need to talk about the one Straw Hat where betrayal wouldn't just break Luffy's heart, it would break the entire world's balance sheet. And you already know who I mean. The Straw Hat whose bounty poster is literally a financial crisis with legs. Vinsmoke Sanji. On paper, Sanji is the worst candidate for a traitor. Bharati Sanji throws away his life to feed a starving pirate because Zeph once did the same for him. Enies Lobby Sanji is the one who quietly opens the gates of justice and takes a beating in the shadows so the crew can move. Whole Cake Island Sanji is the guy who will marry into a fascist murder family and walk away from his dream, his hands, and his captain rather than risk a single bullet touching Zeph. Oda has gone out of his way to define this man by self-sacrifice. But here's the thing. When an author pushes a single trait that hard, you have to ask whether it's a shield or a setup. Is Sanji's loyalty an immutable law of the story? Or is Oda polishing the glass specifically so it shatters better on impact? The more loudly a character insists, "I'll never betray my captain," the more narratively potent it is when they're forced to do exactly that. I need you to remember Whole Cake structurally, not just emotionally. Sanji lies to Luffy. He kicks him away. He signs the marriage contract. On a plot chart, that is a betrayal arc already, just one where we're shown the blackmail in real time. Germa's collar bombs, Zeph's hostage status, the Baraty's vulnerability. Oda literally storyboards what a coerced Sanji looks like. That's not an accident. That's a blueprint. Now plug Sanji into our three-category framework. In terms of pre-writing, he's loaded. North Blue origin that made no sense for an East Blue cook. Mr. Prince. The weird bounty with only his face. Then the Germa reveal detonates and retroactively makes all of that feel intentional. Add in unresolved feelings about his family, his inferiority complex about his failure body, and his chivalry that borders on self-destructive programming, and you have a character who is perfectly built to be manipulated by a higher power. And crucially, he acts alone. Constantly. Baraty, Alabaster, Eni's Lobby, Thriller Bark, Whole Cake, 10 Rooftop, Egghead with York's Seraphim. Sanji's default problem-solving mode is disappear from the crew and handle it myself without telling Luffy. For a traitor plot, this is not a sin. This is normal. This is exactly what you need if you want to hide an off-screen meeting or a suspicious Denden Mushi call in the negative space between chapters. So what are the retrofitting options? Very simple, very evil. A future arc reveals that during Whole Cake or Reverie or that 2-year time skip in Kamabaka Hell, someone from the world government installed a second collar, a threat against Zeph, the Baraty, or even the remaining Vinsmokes. Suddenly some innocuous panel, Sanji staring at a transponder snail, Sanji slipping out for a smoke, gets recontextualized as the moment the blackmail seed was planted. Listen to me. That would be a devastating, short-term betrayal. Sanji feeding intel, sabotaging a plan, maybe even throwing a kick at Luffy under orders before immediately breaking down. Maximum melodrama. Maximum payoff of his self-sacrifice identity. But as a long-term premeditated traitor Oda planned from Chapter 1? Much weaker. The entire emotional thesis of Baraty and Whole Cake collapses if he's been secretly on team government the whole time. So Sanji ends up in this very specific category. Prime candidate for coerced, temporary betrayal, terrible candidate for the grand I was the Judas all along twist. Which, unfortunately for our blood pressure, means we still have to ask who fits that deeper, colder mold. So if Sanji is the poster boy for, I could be forced to stab you in the back, but I'll cry about it the whole time. Jinbe is something much colder. The guy who has already lived an entire other life before he ever set foot on the Sunny. And I need you to actually sit with that for a second. Because in a story where everyone's dream was born on some tiny East Blue rock, Jinbe's dream was born in a prison, a war, and a political negotiation. Here's the thing. Jinbe is not just the helmsman. He's ex-Sun pirates, Former Shichibukai, the man who sat at Big Mom's tea party and told her no. The fishman who inherited Whitebeard's promise to protect Fishman Island. That is an insane CV to just plug into a gag crew. The author gave him deep ties to 3 separate emperors' spheres. Big Mom, Whitebeard's remnant influence, and, through the Shichibukai system, the world government itself. That's not random. That is planned narrative leverage. And he didn't grow up under Luffy's flag. He joined absurdly late. Whole cake, reverie, 1-0. By then, he's a fully formed political actor with decades of alliances, debts, and oaths that do not evaporate because he said, "I'm in" over a psychic cup. This is not a sin. This is normal for real adults. You don't just uninstall your previous life because a rubber man smiled at you. The problem is, in storytelling terms, that means Oda has a walking conflict of interest sitting on the sunny. Jinbe is the only straw hat who routinely talks in balance of power terms. He's the one explaining why Big Mom and Kaido teaming up is apocalyptic, why Fishman Island's protection shifting from Whitebeard to Big Mom to Luffy is a geopolitical earthquake. He's thinking in emperors, in reverie outcomes, in what happens to my people when this war hits the surface. That's not Usopp's "I want to be brave" axis. That's statecraft. So when he tells Luffy at Fishman Island, "You mustn't fight Big Mom yet," that's not cowardice, it's triage. His loyalty to Luffy is constantly sharing oxygen with his duty to Fishman Island. What happens when those finally diverge in a way you can't paper over with a speech? What happens if Imu, or the Gorosei, or even a desperate surviving Big Mom faction offers Fishman Island guaranteed survival in exchange for one thing: information on the Pirate King's crew? Pattern interrupt. You're probably expecting me to say he'd never. But listen to me. We need to stop reading Traitor as cackling villain twirling a mustache. Oda's favorite betrayal category is the tragic, coerced insider. Kanjuro wasn't a random heel turn. He was a man whose entire identity was weaponized. Squad at Marineford doesn't hate Whitebeard. He's convinced he's choosing the lesser evil. Jinbe is terrifying precisely because he's built for that move. A strategic leak, a single misdirection in a crucial battle, a choice to save Fishman Island's future over Luffy's immediate safety. He could betray in a way that feels morally grey, even noble, and still crack the crew's trust in half. And if Oda wants to go even harsher, Jinbe sets the precedent, the necessary betrayal, before we get to the one person whose dream literally cannot coexist with everyone else's. So if Jinbe is the necessary betrayal, the case study in how Oda can hurt us ethically, we need to talk about the nightmare DLC, the low probability, high pain options. The ones the community keeps in the back of the brain and then quickly shoves away because, listen to me, nobody wants to imagine Frankie, Brook or Chopper turning on Luffy. Start with Frankie. Structurally, he's the easiest to sell to a world government boardroom. Former ship dismantler in Water 7. Inheritor of Tom's legacy. The guy who literally burned the Pluton blueprints in front of CP9. That one scene alone is a perfect example of Oda doing double work. Thematically, it's Frankie choosing to trust the future to the next generation. Mechanically, it quietly proves he had access to the single most dangerous set of plans on the planet. Add in his ties to Vegapunk's tech lineage, and suddenly this isn't just fun cyborg dad energy, this is a walking weapons program. Is there foreshadowing of internal conflict with Luffy? Not really. Most of Frankie's sus is either him being a pervert in the background or him doing shady stuff for the ship's sake. This is not a sin. This is normal. Oda uses him as engineering exposition and emotional muscle, not as a moral time bomb. Could the author retrofit some secret deal from his water 7 days? Technically, yes. But that would read more retrofit than intentional, and that difference matters. Brook is weirder. A literal relic from the previous era, wandering the seas for decades. He's connected to Laboon, to the Rumbar pirates, to a promise that predates Roger's execution. In a story obsessed with the Void Century and inherited will, you cannot tell me a skull musician who remembers the old world doesn't have potential classified information rattling around in there. The world government would kill for that. Blackbeard would absolutely collect that. But again, what has Oda actually done on panel? Brook's secrets are mostly about grief, isolation and the payoff of the Laboon foreshadowing. His flashback is closed. His dream is small and painfully sincere. When he's sus, it's him being a gag skeleton or a surprisingly competent spy in whole cake, and the writing frames it as asset, not threat. You'd have to reframe half his appearances to sell a betrayal, and at that point you're not uncovering a plan, you're watching an author yank the wheel, which leaves Chopper. And I need you to sit with how much that would hurt. The crew's doctor, moral heart, the one who cries first and hardest. A Chopper betrayal would be emotionally catastrophic in a way Robin's never could be, because Robin's arc already taught you she can switch sides. Chopper has never had a side except help people and believe in Luffy. Structurally, though, there's nothing there. No secret world government leash, no unresolved mentor, no ominous foreshadowing panel where he stares at Luffy's back and questions the dream. His sus moments are comedic. Money obsession, monster point gags, the usual. You can absolutely write a scenario where someone exploits his medical ethics or poisons him into cooperation, but that's external coercion, not internal betrayal. So here's the thing. Frankie, Brook, and Chopper read less as traitor candidates and more as emotional collateral. They're the ones whose hearts get shattered when the real traitor's plan detonates. They're the measuring stick for how bad the damage is. When Chopper stops smiling, when Brook stops making death jokes, when Frankie can't say super, that's when you know the betrayal landed. And buried in that reaction, in who breaks and who doesn't, is the real tell for the one straw hat whose dream fundamentally cannot coexist with everyone else's. And no, I don't mean Robin. And here's where I need you to unclench your theory muscles for a second, because the name I'm about to say is going to sound insane in a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast way. What if the traitor is Luffy? Not Luffy sells them out to the Marines traitor, not secretly working for Imu traitor. I'm not saying he's going to sit at a Denden Mushi and read off everyone's bounty poster. I'm saying the story has already framed his existence, his body, his destiny, as the single biggest structural threat to his crew that Oda has ever written. The betrayal isn't in his choices. The betrayal is baked into what he is. Because here's the thing. The Nika reveal quietly moved Luffy from idiot rubber boy into geopolitical WMD in a straw hat. The community treats Gear 5 as a meme, as cartoon physics fan service. But the author went out of his way to tell you this fruit was hidden, renamed, lied about by the Gorosei for centuries. This wasn't random. This was intentional. Someone, long before Luffy ever met Shanks, was already planning around that fruit, around that body, around that awakening. When you fold in Emu staring at Luffy's poster, the Gorosei panicking every time he moves, and the explicit connection between Nika, Joy Boy, and the Void Century, you end up in a very uncomfortable category of storytelling. If Luffy's fate is chained to an ancient weapon tier event, something on the scale of Pluton waking, or the world literally being reshaped, then his success as Pirate King doesn't just threaten the world government, it automatically endangers the dreams and physical safety of everyone standing next to him when the switch flips. And Oda has been stress testing that for years. Luffy's whole freedom first, consequences later philosophy already functionally betrays his crew's safety over and over. He rings the Ox Bell and declares war on the world government, then vanishes for 2 years while the people who carry his Jolly Roger get hunted. He punches a celestial dragon on Sabaody, and the entire crew is instantly obliterated from the board. He charges into Eni's lobby, Marineford, Wano, Egghead, dragging his friends into escalating categories of disaster because that's what his dream demands. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is Oda very deliberately escalating the cost of following Luffy from "you might get hurt" to "your entire dream might be collateral damage." So when the truth of Nika fully lands, when Robin can finally read the last poneglyphs and connect Joy Boy, the weapons, and whatever Imu is scared of, we need to be ready for a meta betrayal. Not Luffy chose us over the world, or Luffy chose the world over us. But following Luffy always meant walking toward a predetermined cataclysm we never consented to. In that moment, the Straw Hats aren't just betrayed by a person. They're betrayed by the story they thought they were in. And if that's the real game Oda's been pre-writing from chapter 1, then the question stops being who will sell them out and becomes much worse. Who can survive knowing that staying loyal to Luffy might doom everything they ever wanted? Because there is one dream on that ship that absolutely cannot coexist with a Joy Boy triggered apocalypse. And that's where we're going next. So if one Straw Hat dream can't coexist with the Joy Boy apocalypse, we need to talk about the last time Oda pulled that move. Because he already ran this experiment once, and his lab rat's name was Kanjuro. Kanjuro is Oda doing a Traitor speedrun. You meet him as a pathetic gag samurai, literally introduced as a guy who can't draw, stuck in a wall, throwing birds that look diseased. He fights with the scabbards, he bleeds with them, he cries for Momonosuke, and then, hundreds of chapters later, the floor drops out. He's Orochi's mole, a Kurozumi actor whose entire personality has been one long performance. His tragic backstory doesn't just add depth, it rewrites every panel he's ever stood in. Here's the thing. Once you know the twist, the retroactive clues are everywhere. His devil fruit is conveniently useless in most real combat, so he can stay visually integrated in battles without ever deciding the outcome. He has repeated failures at crucial moments, always just a bit too late, just a bit too clumsy. He disappears off-screen at suspicious times, then pops back in with an over-the-top loyalty speech about serving the Kozuki to the death. It reads as comedy on first pass. On second pass, it's a confession wearing clown makeup. Now, was all of that meticulously planned from his first sketch? Or did Oda retrofit some of it when he locked in the reveal? This is where the community melts down and starts arguing in circles. So I need you to separate categories. Some hints are genuine foreshadowing. The acting motif, the "I'm so bad it's suspicious" incompetence, the way he's always present for key leaks. Other bits are very obviously Oda going back and stitching meaning into earlier, flexible moments so the reveal feels airtight. This is not a sin. This is normal. This is how long-form storytelling survives its own length. If you zoom out, a pattern emerges. Oda's traitors are never random background NPCs. They're emotionally close, visually welded into the core group. But there's always something just a little off. Not cartoonishly evil, just misaligned. Their competence wobbles in weird places. Their behavior leans into theatrics. They hug the spotlight whenever loyalty is questioned, because overperforming devotion is the best camouflage an author can give a mole. So listen to me. That pattern is our checklist. When we go back through Straw Hat history, we're not chasing every stray panel like a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. We're hunting for specific red flags Oda has already used. Odd failures at crucial beats, convenient off-screen absences when information leaks, loyalty speeches that feel a little too written, even for Oda, and maybe the biggest one, unresolved backstory gaps that still haven't been fully cashed in. Because if Kanjuro was the rehearsal, then Somewhere on the Sunny is the main performance, and in the next section, we're going to start crossing names off that list. So if Kanjuro was the rehearsal, we need to talk about the stage directions. Because Betrayal in One Piece is not just in the dialogue or the twist chapter. It's in the panels. It's in who Oda draws alone, who he hides, who he literally turns away from the speech bubble everyone else is reacting to. And listen to me. This is where the pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast, part of your brain, goes absolutely feral. Here's the thing. When Oda is seeding a mole, the visual language starts lying before the character does. Traitors and informants are constantly framed as liminal. They're in the crowd shot, but a little off to the side. Their eyes are shaded out under the brim of a hat. Their back is to the group during a big declaration of trust. Or they're physically drawn between two factions in the same panel, literally bisecting the page composition. Take Lucci in Water 7. Before the pigeon starts talking, he's always stationed just behind Iceberg, shoulders turned away from the other shipwrights, eyes in shadow while the rest of Galila is open and expressive. Kaku gets goofy reaction faces. Lucci gets blank, flat, almost mask-like stares. The author is already telling you, this guy is not actually with this room. Kanjuro is even more blatant in hindsight. Go back to the early Wano flashbacks. When the scabbards swear their lives to Odin, Kanjuro is repeatedly drawn a half step further back, or facing away, or with his eyes obscured while everyone else is crying their hearts out. It reads as a quirky design choice on first pass. On the reread, it's visual foreshadowing screaming in your face. York on Egghead, same category. In group Vegapunk shots, she's often slumped on the edge of the frame, separated by machinery, or literally facing the opposite direction of the others. When the satellites argue, she's the one whose eyes we can't see, whose body language doesn't match the emotional temperature of the room. Before she says a single traitorous word, the composition has already voted her most flippable. Now here's where the community gets nervous. Because when you take that exact toolkit and start scanning Straw Hat scenes, you find some uncomfortable echoes. Panels where one member is watching the party from the shadows of a doorway. Big emotional spreads where 9 faces are lit and 1 is shaded. Strategy meetings where everyone leans in toward Luffy and one person is drawn with their back half turned, occupying that same between-two-world space. A single panel proves nothing. One weird angle is not a signed confession. This is not a sin. This is normal visual variance. But when the same character keeps getting isolated in crowd shots, keeps having their eyes hidden during trust speeches, keeps being staged on that border between factions across multiple arcs, at that point you're not in coincidence territory anymore. You're in, the author is at least pre-writing them as flippable territory. And I need you to sit with the implication there. Because if Oda has been quietly using the same betrayal grammar on certain Straw Hats that he used on Lucci, Kanjuro and York, then the traitor isn't going to come out of nowhere. The panels have already been whispering their name. In the next sections we're going arc by arc, Alabasta to Egghead, and tracking exactly where that visual language clusters. And when you see which Straw Hats keep ending up alone in the frame, you're not going to be able to unsee it. So if the panels have been whispering, we need to ask a very basic question. When did Oda even start training us for the idea that someone on the ship might not be fully on the ship? Because that conditioning doesn't start at Enies Lobby, or Dressrosa, or Wano. It starts way back when the Going Merry still had a warranty. Go to Arlong Park. Nami is the prototype traitor Straw Hat. On paper, she's doing the worst possible thing, stealing the ship, robbing the crew, sailing back to the fisherman warlord who literally owns her village. From the outside, that is betrayal. From the inside, it's survival. And Oda stages it so you, as a reader, feel both. You feel the sting when she pushes Luffy away, and then you feel the snap when she finally asks for help. That's not just a sad backstory. That's a controlled experiment in whether a crewmate can be against the crew's goals without ever being against Luffy in their heart. Now, contrast that with Zoro. Zoro's early writing is almost aggressively anti-ambiguity. Shellstown, Baratie, Arlong Park, every time there's a conflict, Zoro is the guy whose loyalty is never in question. He'll fight Mihawk and get carved open in front of everyone, then turn around and pledge that he'll never lose again, specifically to Luffy's face. Zoro is the baseline. He's the control group in Oda's lab. When I say traitor Straw Hat, your brain immediately goes, well, obviously not Zoro, and that reflex is intentional. The author is building a spectrum so later, more morally tangled characters have something to be measured against. Then you get Usopp. And listen to me. Usopp is where the screws start to loosen. His introduction in Syrup Village is an absolute mess of signals. Chronic liar. Local joke. Not a warrior of the sea, but a kid playing pirate on the hill. He doesn't join because he's ideologically aligned with Luffy's dream of freedom or Zoro's code of honor. He joins because he wants to be brave someday, and this is the least terrible opportunity. That's a different category of loyalty. It's aspirational, not proven, and the storytelling keeps that tension alive. He's the one who runs, who bluffs, who hides behind alter egos. This is not a sin. This is normal human behavior. But it's also Oda quietly telling you that not every Straw Hat is built on Zoro's binary of live or die for the captain. By the time we hit Alabasta, the crew as a whole is already operating in morally grey territory. They follow Vivi into a civil war they barely understand, against a warlord with spies in every room, on the word of a princess they met on a crime island. That is insane. That is also trust. And in the middle of that, you have Sanji doing Mr. Prince operations, vanishing from the group, manipulating phone calls, lying to Crocodile, saving the day from off-screen. Fans cheer because it's cool, but Here's the thing. Structurally, that is independent action bordering on unsupervised espionage. It's the first time a Straw Hat wins an arc by not being where everyone thinks he is. I need you to see the pattern. From the very start, Oda is writing a crew where not everyone has the same information, not everyone is present in the same scenes, and not everyone shares the same level of ideological buy-in. This is fine. This is normal. But in a story obsessed with spies and double agents, that's also groundwork. The next arcs don't introduce the possibility of internal fracture. They escalate a system that was already in place. And when we leave Alabasta and head toward Water 7, that system finally breaks on screen. For the first time, a Straw Hat actually walks away. Usopp walking away in Water 7 isn't a quirky side quest. It is Oda running a full dress rehearsal for a Straw Hat Traitor arc and then rolling the tape back before it hits the point of no return. We need to sit with what that fight actually is. The Going Merry conflict is not a gag, not a ha-ha coward sniper throws a tantrum. It is a genuine ideological break over what it means to be captain and crew. Luffy is saying, I decide the hard calls, the ship is done. Usopp is saying, your dream doesn't get to erase my attachment or my agency. Both of those positions are emotionally valid. That is the problem. There is no cartoon villain in the room to absorb the blame. And here's the thing. That's the first time Oda points the gun at the found family fantasy and pulls the trigger, even if he only wounds it. Up to that point, the crew is chaotic but safe. They yell, they hit each other, they get over it by dinner. Water 7 breaks that pattern. Luffy cries, Usopp bleeds. The rest of the crew stands there paralyzed because the unbreakable bond is suddenly, very visibly, breakable. Oda proves on the page that he is willing to make the Thousand Sunny feel emotionally unsafe before he even draws it. Now, zoom out to the structure. While the Straw Hats are imploding over a ship, CP9 is quietly betraying Galila from within. Iceberg's most trusted craftsmen are government assassins. So on one layer, you have a classical traitor plot. Secret agents, double lives, a reveal. On the second layer, you have Usopp betraying the unity of the Straw Hats, walking out, refusing orders, even sniping at them from a distance. It is a double-layered fracture running in parallel. External infiltration, internal rupture. Listen to me. If Oda wanted Water 7 to be the true Straw Hat Traitor arc, he would not have to invent a new machine. He already built it. All you do is tweak the dials. Usopp doesn't just leave. He passes Merry's location to the enemy out of desperation. Or he accepts a CP9 deal to save the ship. Or Robin's apparent betrayal doesn't get reversed. She actually chooses Eni's lobby. The scaffolding is already there. Secret meetings, missing crewmates, suspicious behavior, a crew forced to chase one of their own. Pattern interrupt. We always point at Kanjuro as the big betrayal masterclass. Wrong category. The prototype is Usopp. Once you see that, Water 7 stops being a one-off drama spike and starts reading as a controlled demonstration. Oda is telling you, and I need you to hear this, I can break this crew whenever I want. The only reason it resolves with masks and Sojuking and a teary reunion is because at that stage of the story, he chooses mercy. This is not a sin. This is normal for a long game author testing how far the community will let him push the found family before they riot. And the scary part is, that rehearsal worked, which means, heading into the final saga, Nothing is stopping him from running the same play again without pulling back. So after Eni's lobby, you and I walk away on a high. Flag burned, Robin saved, Usopp crawling back in through the side door, the whole community chanting Nakama in 12 different languages. It feels airtight, unbreakable. The Found Family speedrun is complete, and then Oda immediately starts trying to break it. Here's the thing, post Eni's lobby, the story's surface is celebration, but the structure is stress test. The author has proved they'll never abandon each other voluntarily, so the only way to keep tension alive is to ask a nastier question. What happens when love and loyalty run into a world that does not care? When the category of trust collides with the category of survival in a sea ruled by emperors and gods and paperwork? Thriller bark is the first controlled experiment. On paper, it's a goofy horror movie detour. Zombies, shadows, a giant wedding cake of a ship. This is fine. But buried in there is Bartholomew Kuma, the world government's walking delete key, and Zoro's nothing happened moment. Listen to me. That scene is not just about loyalty. It's about unilateral decision-making. Zoro doesn't wake Luffy up. He doesn't call a crew meeting. He chooses, for everyone, that he will die here and they will live. Survival of the crew is now contingent on individuals making secret, irreversible choices behind each other's backs. That's not betrayal. But functionally, it lives in the same neighborhood. Then Sabaody takes that quiet structural problem and rips the floorboards up. Up to this point, every Straw Hat crisis has been solved by more trust, louder speeches, bigger punches. At the auction house, they do that again. They punch a celestial dragon, declare war on God 2.0, and you feel that same Eni's lobby energy humming. And Oda goes, cool. What if that doesn't matter? What if an admiral, a pacifista army, and a warlord show up and your faith in Luffy is the reason you all get erased from the map? Kuma doesn't ask them to betray each other. He just proves external force can tear them apart even when they'd rather die together. The author is very intentionally separating no traitor from no separation. Those are not the same thing, and he wants you uncomfortable with that difference. Marineford is the solo version of that experiment. Strip Luffy of his crew, plug him into the world's biggest war, and watch the same trust dynamic break in a different direction. The Straw Hat's safety is suddenly a function of Luffy's impulsive grief and the world's reaction to his bloodline. They can't stop him. They can't help him. They can only watch their captain become a global problem on the news. And again, this is not a sin. This is normal for an author ramping stakes. Prove that we love each other is no longer a sufficient shield. Because once you've told the audience that loyalty isn't enough to keep these idiots safe, you've quietly opened the door to something harsher than Kuma's paw or Kizaru's laser. You've opened the door to the possibility that the next rupture doesn't come from outside at all. And the terrifying part, heading toward the final saga, is who Oda has been quietly training to walk through that door. So when we sail out of Sabaody round 2 and hit Fishman Island, Oda quietly flips the difficulty setting on the entire game. Up to now, betrayal has mostly been personal. Miss Wednesday, Mr. 2, CP9. But suddenly you have a prophecy on the wall saying, hey, your himbo captain is destined to destroy this entire nation, and that is a different category of problem. Because now every move the Straw Hats make is political. Whether they understand it or not. Luffy punches a celestial dragon, declares war on Big Mom over Candy, gets adopted by Shirahoshi, the walking ancient weapon teaser, and the community goes, wow, peak himbo energy. But from the author's side, that's intentional escalation. That's Oda turning the crew into geopolitical actors who generate intel, alliances, and enemies just by existing. And sitting right there is Jinbe, former Warlord, former Big Mom affiliate, former Arlong bossman. The definition of divided loyalties. Jinbe's whole deal on Fishman Island is, I owe Whitebeard, I owe Big Mom, I owe my people. And then he tells Luffy, there are things he can't say yet. Listen to me. That is not just honorable samurai speech. That is a structural demonstration that a Straw Hat adjacent ally can be loyal and still withhold mission-critical information. Then Punk Hazard hits, and Oda basically shows you the Yonko chessboard for the first time. Caesar's SAD factory, the giant children, the gas weapon tests. This is not a random mad scientist playground. It's the industrial backbone of Kaido's army. And the only reason Law can even run his insane, cut off the smile supply, topple a Yonko gambit, is because he has information nobody else has. The arc is a thesis statement. In the new world, intel is power. If you control the leaks, you control the war. Here's the thing. Dressrosa takes that thesis and turns it into a conspiracy corkboard. Doflamingo has agents in the royal family, the Colosseum, the toy factory, the black market. Everyone is informing on everyone. And who is the one playing six-dimensional chess? Not Luffy. Law. Law is the guy with the secret multi-step plan, the hidden objectives, the I'll tell you the real target later energy. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is Oda training you to accept that your protagonists can be in the dark inside their own alliance. Meanwhile, structurally, the crew stops moving as a single organism. From Fishman Island onward, it's always split teams, missing members, people running solo side quests with incomplete intel. This is fine. This is normal adventure storytelling. But it also means that in-universe, you could have someone feeding information upward and nobody would notice because half the time they're not even on the same island, never mind the same page. And once you stack all that, prophecies, divided loyalties, industrial scale secrets, alliance politics, you hit a point where the idea of a perfectly secure, leak-proof Straw Hat crew becomes almost laughable. Unless, of course, the author is very intentionally saving that crack in the hull for the moment it hurts the most. Which is where we need to talk about what Oda starts doing next. Turning Traitor from an external plot device into an internal time bomb. Turning Traitor into an internal time bomb starts with a very simple, very cruel tool. Emotional blackmail. And Oda has already test-driven it on a Straw Hat in a way the community still undersells. Whole Cake Island is not just Sanji's sad backstory arc. It's a controlled experiment in forced betrayal. You take the crew's most self-sacrificing member, you dangle Zeph's life, Baraty's future, and his friend's safety in front of him, and you watch him do the math. Sanji doesn't suddenly stop loving Luffy. He doesn't flip categories from ally to enemy. He just gets cornered into a scenario where kicking his captain in the face is the rational move. Here's the thing. That's not hypothetical foreshadowing. That is literally a Straw Hat throwing hands at Luffy on panel with intent because an emperor weaponized his heart. Big Mom's entire operation is built on this. Hostage portraits, bomb threats at tea parties, Pudding's fake affection, Reiju's body on the line. The author is showing you a system where betrayal is a currency and the people cashing it in are the ones who care the most. Listen to me. Oda proves in Whole Cake that he is fully willing to put a straw hat in a position where obedience to the enemy is the least bad option. Sanji agreeing to marry Pudding, to wear the cuffs, to walk away from the Sunny and tell Luffy, "I'm not coming back," is not a gag. It's a stress test. How far can you push a loyal character before the audience turns on him? How far can you push the captain before trusting that character looks suicidal? And then he runs the same experiment in Wano, but scaled up through found family. Momonosuke, Hiyori, the Scabbards. These aren't just side characters. They're an adopted clan the Straw Hats buy into emotionally. That makes them leverage. Orochi and Kaido don't need to outfight Luffy if they can threaten the kid he just swore to protect. Every time Momo is dangling from a noose or sobbing on the floor, the story is whispering, "What would you trade to keep this child alive?" Enter Kanjuro, the ultimate weaponization of that bond. For years, the Scabbards and Momo love this man, bleed for him, rearrange their entire strategy around rescuing him. Then Oda flips the card and reveals he's been feeding their movements to Orochi since day one. It's the same structure as Whole Cake, but from the other angle. Instead of forcing a good man to act bad, he lets a bad man hide in the costume of found family. And in both arcs, the trust pays off. Sanji returns. The Scabbards still die for their cause. The suicidal faith in their comrades is vindicated, but only after it looks utterly deranged in the moment. This is not a sin. This is not Oda went too far. This is normal for an author calibrating the dial. He's measuring very intentionally how much coercion you'll tolerate before you abandon a character. Because we need to talk about what happens when that same emotional gun isn't pointed at Zeph or Momo, but at the entire world. And that's why Egghead hits different. Egghead is the first arc where the emotional gun isn't pointed at a person or a kingdom, it's pointed at information itself. This isn't Marineford, where the question is who dies on the battlefield. This is who controls the save file of history. Vegapunk's brain, the Void Century Records, the Punk Records Network, those aren't just lore drops, they're weapons. The author literally turned knowledge into a giant hard drive in the sky and then had the Gorosei panic speedrun, a DMCA takedown. Here's the thing, on Egghead, punches are almost background noise. The real combat is over who knows what and when. Vegapunk's broadcast timer, the Gorosei's blackout, York's secret deal, Saturn's emergency line to Imu. Every fight is actually a race to prevent or release data. You can feel Oda shifting categories here. Brawn is still cool, this is fine, but it's not the scarce resource anymore. The scarce resource is intel. The poneglyph roots, the ancient weapon coordinates, the true history that can delegitimize 800 years of propaganda in a single stream. I need you to clock how intentional that is. We spent 1,000 chapters training our pattern-seeking monkey brains to care about who has the biggest punch. Then the final saga quietly says, "Congrats. That entire power system is now secondary to who has the better Wikipedia." Robin's ability to read stones, Frankie's blueprints, Vegapunk's brain, even Morgan's tabloids. These are now more dangerous to the world government than 100 Kaidos. That's not me being dramatic. That's literally how the story is framed. And in a war of information, a traitor is not just a narrative twist. A traitor is infrastructure. One straw hat feeding routes, poneglyph rubbings, crew conditions, even emotional weak points to the world government or Blackbeard. That is worth more than a fleet of battleships. Squad stabbing Whitebeard almost broke a war because of one fake intel packet. Kanjuro's leaks nearly deleted Wano's entire rebellion. Now imagine that level of sabotage, but aimed at the only crew that can actually reach Laughtail. Egghead keeps cutting away to prove this point. Every few chapters, we hard jump to the outside world reacting in real time. The five elders arguing over bounties, Marines tracking transponder signals, Blackbeard's moves, Morgan spinning narratives about warmongering Luffy. The Straw Hats are no longer just travelling. They're being watched, theorised about, and counterplanned by in-universe fans. Surveillance has become a character. So when our community goes, well, if Oda ever wanted to do a real Straw Hat traitor, he missed his chance. I need you to slow down. No. This is the chance. This is the exact window the story has been pre-writing toward. When information is the final battlefield, when Robin's brain is a nuclear code, when every log-pose decision can swing empires. If you're Oda and you've been sitting on a planned betrayal for decades, this is the only moment where cashing it in doesn't just hurt emotionally, it changes the entire strategic map of the final war. And the scary part is, he's already shown us the blueprint for how to do it. We just assumed it would never be used on them. And this is where we need to talk about the cursed trinity of One Piece meta, SBS, color spreads, and cover stories. Because if the traitor blueprint exists in the text, the training wheels version exists in the margins where Oda gets to troll us directly. Start with SBS, Oda's little Q and A corner where serious questions go to die. On paper, it's chaos. Fans ask whether Zoro's nipples have haki. Oda responds with a doodle of Usopp's nose doing taxes. This is fine. This is normal. But here's the thing. Buried inside the gremlin energy, he absolutely hides real foreshadowing. He'll joke about Sanji's family being worse than pirates years before Whole Cake. He'll answer a question about Robin's bounty with a flippant, well, she's dangerous to the world, you know. And then 20 volumes later, the Gorosei are literally saying the same sentence. The problem is, the delivery mechanism is a clown horn, so the community files it under gag instead of evidence. Now, zoom out to color spreads. This is where Oda gets to be an author and an art director at the same time. No dialogue, no editor demanding a punchline. Just pure visual storytelling. And over you get these spreads where one straw hat is framed just a bit off. Someone turned away while the rest are facing us. Someone posed with enemy-adjacent imagery while the others are in soft, goofy motifs. You get chains wrapped around certain characters, masks on others, split shadows cutting through a smiling group shot. Is every one of those an intentional betrayal seed? No. But when you see, for example, Robin isolated in a sea of government iconography, or Usopp's silhouette split in half while everyone else is whole, you have to at least ask what category that belongs to. Cover stories are the third channel, and Oda has been using them as rehearsal space for big themes since forever. Before Kanjuro, you already had mini-arcs about agents living double lives, about pirates selling out crews, about characters torn between two allegiances and finally choosing one at the last second. Those little side comics about CP9, Enel on the Moon, or Hachi's redemption arc are not random doodles. They're test runs for betrayal, espionage, and ideological drift that later show up in the main story with knives out. He literally trained us on the traitor was here the whole time, in the cover stories before detonating Kanjuro in Wano. Now, I need you to hear this. Overreading this stuff is extremely easy. You are a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. I am too. This is not a sin. But pretending these channels don't matter at all is equally brain-poisoned. Oda has conditioned fans to treat SBS, spreads, and covers as part of the storytelling pipeline. Ignoring them because some theories went off the rails is throwing out the map because you once misread a street sign. So when chains, masks, and split shadows keep clustering around the same few straw hats, I'm not telling you, confirmed traitor, pack it up. I'm saying the author keeps rehearsing one specific emotional beat in his side material. And the only place he hasn't cashed it in yet is on the Sunny, which means we have to stop hand-waving vibes and actually walk through the candidates one by one. So if we're going to walk through the candidates, we need to be adults about this. Not who do I hate or who would hurt me the least, but what makes structural sense for the author who planned Laboon in reverse. Here's the thing. I'm ranking on 4 axes: narrative impact, existing setup, plausible motive or coercion, and Oda's demonstrated willingness to hurt you through that character. Not vibes, not headcanons. The boring craft stuff that actually drives long-form storytelling. Number 1, for me, is Robin. It's not even close. She is the only Straw Hat whose literal existence is a geopolitical time bomb. The world government needs her. The revolutionaries need her. Imu, the Gorosei, everyone's endgame flows through one archaeologist who has already worked for Crocodile, already tried to die on the crew, and already has a documented history of selling herself out to survive. That doesn't mean she secretly hates them. This is normal. This is how you pre-write a character who can be cornered into one catastrophic compromise. Then I put Usopp. Listen to me. Emotionally, he is the most plausible. We've already watched him fracture once at Water 7, walk out, and literally fight Luffy over a ship. His whole deal is insecurity weaponized into cowardice, and then, occasionally, into courage. If an enemy offers him a way to protect the crew by feeding controlled information, that's the exact kind of tragic, self-justifying betrayal Oda adores. The community hates this idea because Usopp is the audience insert, but that's exactly why he works. Maximum identification, maximum damage. Third is Sanji. On paper, he's the easiest to coerce. Germa, Zeph, Barati, the all-blue dream, the bounty weirdness, whole cake blackmail. His backstory is already a dossier of pressure points. But here's where the criteria matter. We already cashed in the Sanji betrays the crew under duress card in whole cake. Doing it again risks feeling like a rerun, unless the twist is formally different in category, not just in flavour. Fourth, I'd put Jinbe, massive political ties, former warlord, ex-Big Mom subordinate, direct line to Fishman Island's promise and the ancient weapon discourse. Mechanically, he's a great bridge for information leaks. Emotionally, though, he joined so late and so clean that the betrayal sting is lower than Robin or Usopp. Oda can hurt you with Jinbe, but he can't annihilate you with Jinbe. Pattern interrupt. Notice who I haven't seriously entertained yet. Frankie, Brook, even Luffy get tossed around in theory threads. And sure, you can point to Vegapunk connections, Brook's time gap, or D-symbolism, and build a conspiracy board like a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. This is fine. This is fun. But when you measure against Oda's actual patterns, Kanjuro, Squad, CP9, the traitors are always structurally central to the arc's theme and already framed around trust, which is why the point here isn't Robin guilty, case closed. I need you to understand that what Oda has done is much scarier. He has pre-written multiple viable betrayal routes, all seeded, all defensible. The gun is already on the mantle in 3 different rooms. The only question for the final saga is which one he decides to fire. And here's the thing. Once you admit there are 3 guns on 3 mantles, you have to ask a much dumber, much scarier question. What if one of them has already gone off and we just didn't hear the shot? I need you to sit with that for a second, because our community has this comforting assumption that the traitor straw hat is a future event. Capital R reveal, dramatic panel, tears, speeches, the whole package. But Kanjuro already proved that's not how Oda prefers to do this. With Kanjuro, most of the betrayals were technically in the past. The reveal just relabeled things we'd already read. So we need to rerun that lens on the Straw Hats. Go back through the final saga and ask, where has the world government been weirdly, suspiciously prepared? Egghead is the obvious example. The Buster Call 2.0 doesn't just show up. Saturn walks in with Seraphim, Pacifistas, and a kill order for Vegapunk queued up like he got the itinerary emailed to him. The Gorosei, knowing about Punk records, about the Stella's research, about the exact danger of that O'Hara data, feels less they're smart and more someone is forwarding them the notes. And it's not just Egghead. On Wano, the raid timing miraculously leaks multiple times. We blame Kanjuro because the story tells us to, but remember how the Beast's pirates keep adjusting perfectly. Orochi learns about the Sunny's survival, about the port switch, about the alliance size. Kanjuro covers a lot of that, sure. But when an author has already shown you one traitor and is foreshadowing a bigger one, it's very easy to hide a second drip of intel in the noise. Listen to me. Kanjuro's betrayals only felt obvious after the reveal. Before that, they were filed in our brains under Oda coincidence. That big junk drawer where we throw every weird panel we can't categorize. This is not a sin. This is normal. This is how long-form storytelling works. You only recode the early scenes once the author gives you the key. So start stress testing specific moments. Robin vanishing during the Reverie timeline while the revolutionary plot implodes off-screen. The crew landing on Egghead at the exact moment Vegapunk is ready to defect. And the exact moment CP0 is already inbound to erase him. The world government sending Lucci's team to that island instead of any other science hub in the world. Is each one in isolation proof of a traitor? No. But as a category of suspiciously perfect timing, they start to rhyme. You can even imagine unintentional leaks. Usopp spinning tall tales in a bar about their adventures and accidentally handing a Cypher Pol agent a roadmap. Jinbe's underworld connections being quietly monitored. Frankie's sunny schematics ending up in a scrap heap someone wasn't supposed to search. Tiny, deniable actions that only become betrayal once Oda circles them in red. And if we're right, future chapters are gonna snap these moments into focus all at once, Kanjuro style. If we're wrong, they stay as eerie coincidences that never quite resolve. The problem is, Oda has built his entire endgame on eerie coincidences that eventually do. And here's where our tiny pattern-seeking monkey brains start flinging theories at the wall. We see those eerie coincidences. We feel that Kanjuro déjà vu, and suddenly every panel is a confession letter written in invisible ink. Listen to me. This is not a sin. This is not bad reading. This is literally how your brain is wired. You are a narrative Roomba trapped in a 1,000-chapter mansion, bumping into every scrap of foreshadowing, every reused pose, every suspicious glance and going, evidence. In a series this dense, with this much visual noise, you are going to see Jesus in toast at some point. This is normal. The problem is what happens after you name the face in the toast. Once you decide it was always Robin, or it could never be a straw hat, confirmation bias kicks in. You don't have to be a psychologist to see it in the community. From that moment, every Robin side-eye to the Marines becomes proof she's reporting in, and every scene of her literally risking her life for the crew gets filed under Oda being misleading. The data that fits the theory is gospel. The data that doesn't is filler. And then we slap the same bias onto Oda's brain. Any twist that feels good, any reveal that snaps into place, gets instantly stamped with planned from chapter 1. No nuance, no categories, just a big shiny genius foreshadowing sticker. Here's the thing. When you do that, you flatten the craft. You erase the very real, very messy, very human process of an author solving problems in real time, shuffling payoffs, and weaponizing accidents. Because if everything was preordained, if every traitor, every betrayal, every tear was locked in stone in 1997, then there's no room to talk about how he adjusted Kanjuro's presence, or how Egghead's leaks feel tuned to modern spoiler culture. You lose the difference between something intentionally planted and something retrofitted so well, it might as well have been. This hits traitor discourse especially hard. On one side you get the overstaters. It was always Robin, look at O'Hara, look at Eni's lobby, look at every Buster call. On the other side, the understaters. He'd never do that to the crew. Betrayal is off the table. Stop being weird. Both positions turn Oda into a statue. Either he's a cold mastermind who never deviates, or a cuddly dad who would never hurt his children. Pattern interrupt. What if he's neither? What if he's a ruthless planner and a ruthless improviser at the same time? I need you to hold both ideas in your head. Oda is incredibly intentional. The Void Century, Imu, ancient weapons, the Straw Hat's dreams, those are pre-written load-bearing walls. But he's also incredibly adaptive. He can look at a running gag, a background panel, a minor quirk in Sanji or Usopp or Jinbe, and decide 10 years later, actually, that's the pressure point I'm going to press. We need to read the traitor question in that tension. Not who was destined to betray them, but who has been positioned so that, if Oda chooses, betrayal would feel inevitable. That's where the real terror lives. And once you read the crew that way, certain straw hats start looking a lot more structurally dangerous than others. And here's where I need you to pump the brakes on the Oda is a 4D chess god meme. Because if you follow that to its logical conclusion, you actually make the story less scary. If every betrayal, every death, every straw hat tear was etched into a stone tablet in 1997, then none of this is risky. None of this is vulnerable. It stops being a guy sweating over a weekly manuscript and turns into a museum tour where the guide already knows exactly which exhibits you're going to cry at. That sounds respectful, right? Wow, what a genius, everything was planned. But it quietly erases the possibility that Oda could mess up or pivot or discover something better halfway through Wano. And listen to me. That discovery is where real artistry in a weekly manga lives. Weekly storytelling is not a 25-year flowchart. It's a man in a room with a deadline, making bold choices without perfect information, then retroactively weaving those choices into something that feels inevitable. You see this in the Traitor pattern. Alabaster's spies, CP9 hiding in Galila, Squad stabbing Whitebeard, Kanjuro in Wano, York on Egghead. Do I think Oda had Kanjuro's exact backstory and performance art manifesto written during the East Blue saga? No. I think he had the category, "There will be a traitor among the scabbards." Then, as themes and dynamics evolved, he committed. This is not a sin. This is normal. Here's the thing. When we pretend he pre-wrote every micro detail, we flatten that process into destiny. We turn foreshadowing into prophecy instead of what it usually is in a weekly series. A toolbox. Hints. Options. Escape hatches. With the Straw Hat Traitor question, the more honest read is not Oda picked the Judas in 1997, but Oda has built multiple viable landmines and hasn't stepped on one yet. Robin's past with the world government, Usopp's pattern of running, lying and weaponizing stories, Sanji's Germa baggage and his Mr. Prince double life, Jinbe's split loyalties between Sun Pirates, Fishman Island and Luffy. Each one is a structurally dangerous pressure point he can escalate into actual betrayal or dial back into a fake-out, depending on how the final saga's pacing, themes, and editorial realities shake out. And that flexibility is why One Piece still feels alive instead of a rigid puzzle box. The story breathes. Egghead's traitor reveals can land, fandom reaction can be measured, and then the next arc can lean harder into paranoia or pull back, because the author is still in the arena, not just executing a script he printed 25 years ago. Once you accept that, a potential Straw Hat betrayal gets way more terrifying, because it's not, "Oh, that panel from chapter 120 doomed them." It's, Oda can still look at the board tomorrow and decide, no, this is where it hurts most. Which means the traitor we're scared of might not even be fully locked in yet. And if that's true, then we need to talk about who he's quietly primed as his best options, and what each choice would actually do to the story. So if Oda can still move the knife, how do you read new chapters without turning into a conspiracy corkboard with a pulse? I need you to understand this part, because this is where the community quietly loses its mind every Sunday. Here's the thing. You have to split your brain in two. There's "this would be cool" brain, and there's "this is definitely what Oda planned" brain. Those are not the same brain. Saying, "it would be cool if Robin has a secret deal with the Gorosei" is fun, it's play, it's you doing sandbox storytelling. Saying, "Robin is confirmed a traitor because she stood in a shadowy doorway in panel 3" is you trying to prosecute the author for a crime he hasn't committed yet. So when a suspicious panel drops, a weird Sanji reaction shot, a Frankie expression the camera lingers on, I need you to run the foreshadow/retrofit/pre-write checklist before you sprint to Twitter with "traitor confirmed." Ask, does this feel intentional foreshadowing, where the author would need this exact setup for a known payoff? Could it be a retrofit seed? Something flexible Oda can weaponize later if he wants? Or is it just pre-written endgame peeking through? A fragment of a decision we can't fully see yet? You don't have to know the answer. The point is to remember that those are different categories. And we need to get out of the habit of treating single panels as smoking guns. One panel is noise. Patterns are signal. Oda has trained you on this. Kanjuro wasn't obvious because of one weird line. He was a slow accumulation of off-panel absences, strangely convenient failures, and visual language that only snapped into focus in retrospect. Same with Blackbeard's body hints from Jaya onward. So instead of Usopp lied in this scene, traitor arc confirmed, try, okay, that's one data point. Does it rhyme with anything else? Clusters of behavior, repeated camera tricks, recurring thematic echoes. Those matter way more than the one eyebrow raise you screenshotted. And listen to me. Being wrong is not a problem. This is not a sin. You are not a failed fan because your Jinbe is a double agent manifesto gets obliterated in 3 chapters. The point of theory crafting is to deepen your engagement with the writing, to make you notice how Oda builds tension and misdirection, not to win some prediction contest where the prize is what exactly? A Reddit flare and chronic paranoia. So treat the Straw Hat Traitor question as an ongoing experiment. We're building a model, not a prophecy. Every new chapter is a data point that either supports, refines, or absolutely demolishes that model. This is fine. This is normal. Scientists don't cry when an experiment disproves their hypothesis. They get excited because the map of reality just got sharper. You're doing the same thing, except the lab is Weekly Shonen Jump, and the microscope is a scan of Robin's side eye. Because once you start thinking that way, you can actually ask the real question. If Oda does pull the trigger, which Straw Hat gives him the most narrative leverage? And what patterns has he already laid down for each candidate? So here's where we zoom out for a second, because I need you to really internalize the framework before we dive back into specific suspects. We've built 3 buckets. Foreshadowing. The author knows the payoff and plants intentional setup early. Retrofitting. The author goes back to old material and assigns it new meaning. And pre-writing. The author already decided the ending and the big reveals, and what you're reading is just those decisions being revealed out of order. That's the whole category system. That's the difference that actually matters when you're arguing on Twitter at 3 a.m. But here's the thing. Oda's genius is not that he sat down at 22 and wrote a 1,200 chapter flowchart with every traitor, every heel turn, every gag mapped to the exact panel. That's the superhero origin story version. It's clean. It's comforting. It's also not how long-form storytelling works. What he actually did was build a world so dense, with so many pre-written anchors and flexible pieces, that he can route multiple paths through it and still hit a satisfying destination. This is not a sin. This is not bad planning. This is in fact harder. You don't just have one perfect future. You have a bunch of live options that all feel intentional because the scaffolding was there from day one. Now apply that directly to the Straw Hat Traitor question. When you look at Robin's history with the world government, her I'll live moment, the fact that she is literally the only person who can read the poneglyphs, that's pre-writing. Oda knew the archaeologist who knows too much was central to the endgame. But whether she ends up as the betrayer, the betrayed, or the hostage, that's a live option sitting on the board for decades. Same with Usopp's chronic lying, his alter egos, his constant crises of courage. Same with Sanji's Vinsmoke baggage and underworld ties. Same with Jinbe's loyalties to multiple captains, or Frankie being the guy who literally built the one-piece equivalent of a doomsday truck. None of these are random quirks. They are structural features that can be retrofitted into a betrayal without breaking character. If Oda decides to flip any of them, you'll get that horrible, delicious feeling of course it was them. How did I not see it? Pattern interrupt. Maybe he hasn't even chosen yet. Sit with that. Maybe, right now, in the final saga, Oda still has 2 or 3 traitor candidates circled in his notes, and he's waiting to see which one sings the loudest as he drafts the climax. This is fine. This is normal. That doesn't cheapen the story. It makes it more terrifying, because he can steer the knife toward whichever emotional artery will hurt the most. And this is why we need to update our language as a community. Instead of screaming, Oda planned this 25 years ago, at every suspicious panel, start saying, Oda set this up as a live option and then committed. It respects the craft. It acknowledges the pre-writing, the genuine foreshadowing, and the smart retrofitting without turning Oda into some prophecy robot, because once you start talking in those terms, you can actually ask the interesting question: which Straw Hat has the most live options baked in? And what would it cost the story if Oda finally cashes one of them in? So, do the Straw Hats already have a traitor? I need you to sit with the uncomfortable answer. Structurally, thematically, in terms of pure writing craft, the story is behaving as if the answer is yes, and Oda has been warming that engine for years. Not maybe if he feels spicy in the final saga. Already. Now. In the code. Here's the thing. When I say traitor, I don't just mean a cackling CP0 agent peeling off a Scooby-Doo mask on the sunny. That's one category, sure, but Oda's betrayal toolbox is wider than that. Kanjuro is the obvious example of the long-term mole. Squad at Marineford is the coerced backstab. And then you have Luffy as Nika, a boy whose very existence is a narrative betrayal of the world government's plan, a ticking time bomb baked into destiny. The series keeps telling you betrayal is not just an action, it's a role someone ends up playing when pre-written forces collide. So when I say they already have a traitor, I'm saying the crew already contains people who are structurally primed to occupy that role the second Oda decides to pull the trigger. Robin is the cleanest case. Former Baroque works officer, only living archaeologist who can read poneglyphs, literal key to the Void Century. Both sides cannot win with Robin alive and loyal to Luffy. That's not headcanon, that's basic war math. Every arc since Eni's lobby has quietly reiterated that if she flips, even under duress, the entire balance of the endgame changes. Usopp is the emotional landmine. We have a Canon Straw Hat civil war in Water 7, where his insecurity about usefulness and dreams already pushed him to betray the crew's course for the sake of the going merry. That was a rehearsal. The foreshadowing is not subtle. If the final war dangles Kaya, Syrup Village, or his brave warrior of the sea fantasy in front of him, are you prepared to swear he never cracks again? Sanji is the blackmail special. Whole Cake Island demonstrated that one threat to Zeph, one collar on his neck, and he will walk away from Luffy on purpose. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is normal character design when you want a believable coerced betrayal on the table. Oda literally test drove the scenario, then parked it for later. Jinbe is the political fault line. Former warlord, ex-Whitebeard ally, Fishman Island statesman with debts to Big Mom and a personal stake in global racial politics. If anyone gets forced into a "for my people" betrayal, it is him. And floating over all of this is the meta Luffy angle. Nika, Joy Boy, the man whose dream might require sacrificing something the crew cannot bear to lose. A destiny-based betrayal where following his path means failing theirs. Could Oda subvert all of this and keep the Straw Hats perfectly loyal to the end? Absolutely. But if he does, that pressure has to vent somewhere else, in an even bigger betrayal. Shanks, Dragon, the revolutionaries. Someone at the level of the series' moral compass just snapped in half. You do not build this much betrayal foreshadowing and then just shrug. So no, I'm not rooting for a traitor. I'm telling you, the text is already humming at that frequency, and pretending you cannot hear it is pattern-seeking monkey in reverse behavior. We need to at least admit the gun is on the mantle before we argue about who's going to fire it. So here's the uncomfortable step we keep dodging. Once you admit the gun is on the mantle, you also have to admit the people standing in front of it could actually pull the trigger. And that does something to how you love them. It should. If your affection only works when betrayal is impossible, that's not trust. That's genre insurance. Listen to me. Seeing the Straw Hats as capable of betrayal does not make them less lovable. It makes every toast on the sunny, every "I trust you with my life" panel way more valuable, because now that trust isn't guaranteed by shonen contract. It's a choice. It's an action they keep taking in a world where Squad stabs Whitebeard and Kanjuro sells out a generation. The community keeps treating "they would never" as a character trait. It's not. "They would never" is a fan headcanon stapled over a story that has been screaming someone eventually will. Here's the thing. Found family only hits because it could break. The whole emotional engine is, these people chose each other. But for how long? Oda has been quietly ratcheting that tension for decades. Alabasta gives you Vivi, who turns down the ship. Water 7 splits the crew on Usopp. Eni's lobby asks if you'd burn the world for one archaeologist. Whole Cake Island says, what if Sanji walks away? Wano finally cashes in on the "one of us is a traitor" pattern, just not on the sunny. Yet. That escalation is intentional storytelling, not coincidence. I need you to re-watch some of those arcs, but with a different lens. Not the pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast, circling every suspicious panel and screaming "Robin sus" in 4K. This is not a sin, but it's also not what I'm talking about. Go back to Water 7 and pay attention to how Oda frames broken trust. Watch how long Luffy refuses to give up on Robin versus how fast he punches Usopp in the face. Revisit Whole Cake and look at how Sanji's loyalty is tested from every angle. Family, duty, self-worth. The point isn't to hunt for gotcha evidence. It's to appreciate how obsessively this author builds, strains, and then reaffirms trust. Because if a Straw Hat betrayal does happen, it is going to hurt precisely because we spent 20+ years insisting it never could. Oda is counting on that denial. He needs you saying "no way, impossible, different category," so that when the panel drops, it doesn't just shock you. It retroactively infects every campfire scene you ever adored. That's not cruelty. That's planned emotional payoff. And this is where we need to be honest about how we engage. This is fine. This is normal. You don't have to become paranoid, freeze-frame reading every eye twitch. You're allowed to love the crew. You're supposed to. Just don't pretend One Piece is a safe space where nothing truly irreversible can happen. The story has never promised you that. Because once you stop pretending, you can finally ask the real question. Not, will there be a traitor? But what kind of story is Oda writing if there is? And what kind of straw hat would he choose to break us with? So here's where I hand you the knife. If we're going to talk traitor straw hat without turning into a mob, I need you to actually do the work with me. In the comments, I want your ranked list of traitor candidates top to bottom. But there's a catch. You don't get to just write Robin Sues and walk away. You have to tag each pick: foreshadow, retrofit, or pre-write. Remember the categories. Foreshadowing is Oda intentionally planned this tension from the start. Retrofitting is this detail was neutral, then got upgraded into a clue. Pre-writing is this twist was decided before chapter 1 and we're only now catching up. When you say Usopp is number 2 on my list, tell me which category his behaviour falls into and why. Is the going merry fight pure character drama, or is it structural rehearsal for a future split? And don't just argue with me. Argue with the panels. I need you to drag receipts into the comments. Specific chapters. That one Robin expression in Eni's lobby when Spanda mentions the ancient weapons. That SBS where Oda jokes a bit too hard about Sanji's Mr. Prince persona. That colour spread where Jinbe is visually separated from the crew during Wano. Treat the comment section as a community archive, not a yelling pit. Here's the thing. If you hit me with X is the traitor because I hate them, I am mentally feeding your theory to Laboon. This is not a sin of morality, it's just bad storytelling analysis. Most likely traitor is a structural argument. It's about narrative function, author incentives, and planned payoffs, not who annoyed you in Thriller Bark. You are allowed to adore Robin and still admit she's the cleanest world government pressure point Oda has. This is fine. This is normal. To keep us honest, I want to flip the game. Pick one straw hat you think is absolutely safe. The one you would bet your entire figure collection on. Now steelman the case that Oda could still flip them. If you're convinced Chopper is untouchable, explain how a government cure for the human fruit turns him into a walking hostage. If you think Frankie is ride or die, explain how Pluton blueprints and Tom's legacy could be weaponized against him. Do this and you'll notice something uncomfortable. With the right pre-writing, Oda could break any of them, and that's the point. This video is not the final word. It's the opening statement. We're building hypotheses now so we can test them against Egghead's fallout, against whatever insanity happens on Elbaf, against the eventual Emu and ancient weapons reveals. When those arcs land, we're coming back to this, pulling up the old comments and seeing whose foreshadow / retrofit / pre-write calls actually matched how the author was really writing this story. So where does that leave us? We've spent an entire video turning the Straw Hat Pirates into a crime scene, so we need to actually close the file, at least for now, before the community sets the Sunny on fire. Here's the thing. Betrayal isn't a twist in One Piece, it's infrastructure. Alabasta runs on spies. Water 7 runs on CP9. Marineford runs on Squad. Dressrosa runs on Doffy's agents. Wano literally has a traitor embedded in the rebellion from panel 1. Egghead is York and the lab leaks. The only core that's never paid that structural cost is the Straw Hats themselves. That's not an accident. That's a loaded gun the author has left on the mantelpiece for 25 years. And you now have tools to actually talk about that without turning into a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in every SBS doodle. We built a 3-category framework so you can separate true foreshadowing from retrofit from coincidence. We walk through the Kanjuro checklist, the off-screen gaps, the jokes that age badly, the convenient failures, the panels that read one way on release and another way after the reveal. We mapped Oda's visual and meta-teasing habits, from color spreads to cover stories to those smug little interview half-answers. So when you look at Robin's government ties, or Usopp's chronic lying, or Sanji's Vinsmoke baggage, or Jinbe's divided loyalties, or Frankie literally holding the blueprints for the apocalypse, you're not just going, suspicious. You're asking, is this an intentional setup that fits the category, or am I just hungry for drama because Egghead has me feral? This is not a sin. This is not bad reading. This is in fact how most serious fans engage with long-running storytelling. But I need you to remember the bigger point. Whether Oda ever pulls the trigger on a real Straw Hat traitor or keeps them perfectly loyal to the end, the game isn't, did I guess the mole correctly? The game is watching how an author who has spent 25 years building trust, testing it, breaking it with people like Kanjuro and Squad, then repairing it, chooses to cash out that emotional investment. Does he weaponize the found family or prove it unbreakable by design? Pattern interrupt. The correct answer might be both at once. A betrayal that is also a sacrifice. A leak that is also protection. If that happens, you're going to want this framework ready. So the next time someone in your group chat says, Oda would never do that to the crew, listen to me. Don't just nod. Ask them why. Ask them to show you panels, interviews, actual textual evidence. Make them argue craft, not vibes. And if you've just spent 2.5 hours letting me make you suspicious of your favorite pirates, this is normal. This is fine. Thank you for sticking through the overthinking. If you want to keep doing this, to keep dissecting manga until the foreshadowing charts start to resemble conspiracy corkboards, hit subscribe, drop your traitor theory in the comments, and we'll keep breaking our brains on this story together.